People think it's hard, but this impressive skill is stupidly easy to master. While at my desk job, I wasn't allowed to have my phone, so I started learning origami instead. I got maybe 20 hours of origami practice a week and even used the work's computer paper for it. I've had several girlfriends I've met just by casually turning a piece of scrap paper into a flower at meetings. Magic, especially card tricks. The hard part is entertaining people enough so that they don't look at the setup. I found the magic part to be fairly easy. The entertaining part is difficult, which includes performance and acting. The acting bit is almost entirely mime, so I'm studying a bit of mime now. Circular breathing. I first heard about a saxophonist doing this and thought it must be the most advanced technique there is. I later learned to do it on a didgeridoo. You train yourself to use your cheeks as a bellow to continue pushing air into your instrument while inhaling through the nose. A common way to practice is to blow into a straw in a glass of water. It's pretty simple once you understand what to do, and it's fairly easy to apply to something like Dax or clarinet after that. I choked on my own face trying to do this. Thanks. For me, it was lockpicking. I was always impressed by it, and then I learned it and realized how really insecure most padlocks are. Oh, it gets worse, my friend. There's a saying in lock sport that the best pick for any lock is its key. Where it gets dicey is that if you live in a residential area in the US, then statistically, there's likely to be at least 2 or 3 other front doors on your block that are keyed alike with your front door, meaning the key to their house is also the perfect key for yours. For a long time, nearly every taxicab in New York City used the same door and ignition keys as did every cop car in New York City. In office buildings with a locked box of keys in the secretary's office, for every cabinet, utility room, and stuff in the building, often as many as a third of the keys in that box will be the same key as opens that box. If you can get into the key box, then you don't need to. Just use the keybox key to open the supply cabinet directly. The amount of stuff being keyed alike in the US is ridiculous. I didn't realize it was that crazy. It sounds selfish, but I hope that the key situation is just a US thing and that I'm safe. Also, does buying lockpicks put you on some kind of watch list there? I'm asking for a friend. Learning the sky, both day and night. Anywhere on Earth, day or night, using the sky, I know the cardinal directions. I know most constellations. I know what most of the fuzzy patches visible to the bare eye are in the night sky and can explain them to people. I can give a basic weather forecast by looking at cloud types, as certain clouds are formed by certain effects. This is not a difficult skill. I learned how to make basic balloon animals and swords in a few hours, and now all the kids at family parties love me. Make me a bicycle, clown. Basic clothes mending and altering. You don't even need a sewing machine for a lot of it. In the same vein, basic electronics repair. Very often, it's just a wobbly solder joint. I'm a 5'5" guy and 30-inch length pants are about an inch too long, and most stores don't carry any shorter. I got an old sewing machine from a friend, watched a YouTube video, and hemmed all of my pants over a few evenings. Also, made my shorts a shorter inseam. Since I basically have to hem any pair of pants I buy, now I buy any length off the clearance rack, and I've saved so much money. Almost anyone can rip a phone book in half. The key is to bend it in a U so that you can separate the pages in the middle ever so slightly. This lets you essentially rip 5,000 individual pages instead of one solid brick. You can master it in about 15 minutes with 2 to 3 books. I used to do it at debate tournaments to assert dominance before the round. This was shockingly effective in a male-dominated, nerd-centric activity. In fact, the hardest part of the trick these days is acquiring and then explaining to your audience what a phone book even is. As an ADHD person, this entire group of answers is like smack to me. Splitting an apple in half with your bare hands. Thumbs are for gripping, not for ripping. Microsoft Excel. In a few hours, you should be able to learn the basics of pivot tables and XLOOKUP, which normally lands you the title of Office Excel Guru. I'm an analyst at a financial firm. Pivot tables and XLOOKUP are 90% of what I do in Excel. Back in my day, they were VLOOKUPs and HLOOKUPs, and we were grateful for the directional distinction. You damn young'uns and your fancy schmancy either direction lookups are spoiled rotten these days. I learned me a few card tricks. Basic sleight of hand could be done in an afternoon. Could you recommend a good source to learn from, please? The Royal Road, the greatest source of how to learn card manipulation. Knots. Learning the trucker's hitch was the most satisfying thing. The trick is doing it enough for it to be muscle memory. The trucker's hitch is done differently by many, but the way I learned taught me the bowline, alpine butterfly, and half hitches. Those 3 alone can get you by in almost any scenario. Building Excel workbooks. You can learn pretty impressive and useful workbook skills in an afternoon of YouTube videos. I'm always surprised how many people just use Excel to make lists or tables, but don't actually utilize basic features to do anything with those lists or tables. Ian's knot for tying your shoe. I saw a YouTube video 10 years ago and I've used only this knot since. Converting to PDF. Basic Excel skills and knowing how to format in Word and PowerPoint make some bosses go crazy. Not to mention fixing issues for your coworker that frantically asks you where their bookmarks went or why their screen is sideways because they have a habit of shortcut keying themselves into the weirdest commands. Juggling 3 balls. It looks impressive, but you can learn it in a weekend. Mental math. I'm not talking Einstein-level formulas flying through your head like that meme. I mean if someone says something like, "Hey, what's 11 times 34?" and you rattle off 374 without pulling out your calculator. They'll think you're a demigod or something. But there's just a lot of simple tricks, and once you learn those tricks, it's cake. Balancing things on your fingertip. The key is to look at the very top of the object. Moonwalking. I learned it when my kids were really young, just to make them laugh. It's all just a rhythm of the feet. You can get it down in like an hour or so. I like to do it randomly when I leave a room. Owen Wilson impersonation. Wow. Learning to read other scripts like Greek or Cyrillic. You know, the Russian alphabet. You don't even need to speak a language that uses it. I don't, but just being able to read them a little bit is so useful. Suddenly, you see these letters everywhere, and half the time you know what it says because it's so similar to a language you already speak. And people think it's super impressive when it actually takes very little time, just some occasional practice to learn it. Also, runes. Super cool, super easy, and quick to learn how to write and read. You can learn like 5 chords on the guitar and play a crapload of songs. Anyway, here's Wonderwall. Kiting mobs as the hunter. As a WoW player, that's how I read the question too. I haven't played in 10 years, but that's still where my mind went. Spinning yarn and crochet. The basics are pretty easy and you get better fast with practice. Plus, stuff that looks really complex is usually just the basics in various fancy configurations. Rubik's Cube. I agree with you here. I learned it over 40 years ago and can still impress people every time. I'm not one of those 30-second solvers, I wish, but I always do it in a minute or 2. Wait, people are still impressed by that? I knew that there was a pattern or chain or whatever that you had to make, even though I've never bothered to do it myself, so it feels like that it would be common knowledge that this person is basically just entering a pre-memorized deductional process or something. I think if I saw someone doing it for attention, I'd think that they were an utter tryhard. Reading Korean. Hangul, the writing system, is incredibly simple and learner-friendly. You'd think it was developed as one of those artificial languages designed to be easy to learn, except this is a real language with millennia-long history. Basically, each tiny sign is a sound which represents roughly the position of your mouth and tongue to pronounce it. That makes it easy to memorize already, and then you form 2 to 3 sound characters by combining them. The main difficulty is learning how to pronounce and distinguish their vowels. There are 10 vowels. That is aside from actually speaking and understanding the language. The story is cool too. They basically used Chinese characters up until the 15th century or so, and then their emperor at the time basically said, "Nah man, this is whack," and had this super simple writing system devised. Building a computer. You can do it in a day with a YouTube video. It blows people's minds who don't know how simple it is. When it works, building a computer is basically no more complicated than a simple Lego build. There's a handful of components that you have to snap together. When it doesn't turn on, though, that's the real test. If you're going to walk past someone on the street and want to avoid the dance where you both move side to side, physically orient your head and eyes to the way you want to go, and the other person will unconsciously go the opposite way. No awkward dance. Origami. Once you learn the basic folds, a lot of origami is just a combination of these same basic folds. Memorizing pi to a stupid extent. My English teacher once told me people are much more impressed when he did this than when people show that they have actual math knowledge that is in any way actually relevant. And after you get past 3.14, you can just rattle off random numbers and nobody will know the difference. If on the off chance you get called out by a mathematician in the crowd, you just run away. Poof, smoke bomb. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Tying a cherry stem in your mouth. Well, that's more of an advertisement for a skill than a skill itself. Opening an egg one-handed. With or without thousands of pieces of shell in the result, because I've got the first one down. Touch typing. Not the easiest of them all, but very well perceived by others. Being able to look at someone whilst typing is a good way to impress them. Also, it makes your life much more efficient and writing something becomes a breeze. I could never tell how much of an improvement it would be until I learned it. I'm not even that good at it. 60 words per minute in my native language, but the improvement is huge. Hand lettering. To do it for real takes a decent amount of skill and practice, but you can fake it pretty well by writing the word out in cursive and then going back and thickening all of your downstrokes. People are constantly telling me how beautiful my lettering is, but little do they know how easy it really is. When you're a kid, how to solve a Rubik's Cube. It's a pattern of like 7 different movements, and for some reason everyone thinks you're a prodigy for doing it. I once made the mistake of explaining it's just solving the bottom and then using like 4 algorithms to my coworker once. I think it had the opposite effect on them. They were more of a people person. Breaking concrete like the karate masters in movies. It's very easy to learn, very easy to do. Hurts about as much as slapping water in the pool. Quick sting that goes away quickly. Yep, also believe it or not, the 1-inch punch. It looks impressive, but if you are broadly speaking a normal, healthy person with any sense of coordination, you can learn to break one of those standard rebreakable martial arts school boards with it in about an hour of practice starting from 0. You can, of course, learn to add more power to it with more practice, but it doesn't require as much time as you'd expect to take. Solving a Rubik's Cube. I learned many years ago that if you can memorize just 4 simple combinations, you can always solve it no matter how messed up it is. Anytime I see a Rubik's Cube somewhere, I casually solve it and people are always amazed. Learn breath holding. The average person can't hold their breath for 1 minute. Download a few AmITheA app, and I guarantee anyone can hold their breath for 3 minutes within a few weeks of training. Cooking. Easiest and also most essential for your survival. Fixing small engines. Talking to people over the phone. I work in an office full of 22 to 30-year-olds. I'm in my early 50s. They marvel at my ability to make outbound calls and talk with clients and customers, cold calling, calling for basic info. Most have held a phone since they were infants, but never learned to make outgoing calls. Retired hairstylist here. How to turn a bad hair day into an I own the day hair day. Dancing. It's easy, fun, and you get to meet people while you're learning. I'd recommend starting with swing or salsa if that's your jam, and start with social dance, not ballroom. Ballroom is more precise, social is more relaxed. Also, if you're self-conscious like me, remember that everyone else is busy with their own self-consciousness. About 3 months worth of swing lessons and about 3 more months of social dancing, and you'll be the best dancer at most bars and weddings. It's such a hidden talent that you can whip out any time. Non-dancers think you're amazing when you're just doing some simple stuff. Basically, for a $400 to $500 investment, you'll have something that really impresses the other humans for the rest of your life. My boyfriend and I danced at a gamer wedding, and all of a sudden everyone wanted to talk to him and be his friend. He instantly had an allure. He wasn't just a one-note song anymore. For all the Gen Zs, I can both answer the phone as well as my front door when someone knocks without having a panic attack. As a millennial, that sounds fake. That crap is hard. Is it too much to ask for both? I mentally panic every time I see my phone ring, and then I answer it with my pre-memorized, sweet voice actor tones, and I feel like sometimes, but not every time, I take people aback. It's fun. Then I put the phone down, wipe off my cold sweat, and have a lie down. Working on your car feels like it's become a wow skill, but it's super easy. I swear at this point any fix is just on YouTube. I bought a car with some minor issues just so that I could learn my way around a car better, and it's surprisingly easy to perform the minor fixes or maintenance, and it's surprisingly cheap relative to what mechanics quoted me for the same repair. Being able to tell people what day of the week any given date falls on. Taking the tiny effort into cooking. Like, I've wowed people with my most basic recipes that I get done in 15 minutes, like fusilli pasta with chicken, garlic fromage à la crème, and cheese. I used to hang out with friends and just order pizza or burgers. Now we usually cook or barbecue, which is a ton more fun and way more delicious than getting takeaway. How to build a fire properly. There's just a few things between I can't get it going and wow, you're a wizard. Lockpicking. Actually scary when you learn how easy most locks are to pick. Not safe for work, but going south of the border on your girl. It's not hard at all. I've always had issues with being a quick shooter, so I was determined to learn how to make her happy down there, thinking it was going to be this monumental undertaking. Nope. You just keep it moist, firm, but apply gentle pressure, use your tongue and lips, don't be afraid to get that crap all over your face. Pay attention to body language. If they seem to be cooling off, switch it up. If they're tensing up or moaning, keep doing exactly what you're doing unless they state otherwise. Try to mix it up a little bit, you know what works, but don't fall into doing the same thing every single time. And that's it. Also, for all that is holy, trim your fingernails. If you can push your fingernail into your cheek or brush it along your cheek and it hurts, it's too sharp. Your significant other will appreciate that. Catching quarters off your elbow. It's easy as F once you learn the motion. Okay, no hate, but piano. To play absolutely incredibly, well, like concert level, is years and is very difficult. But to be honest, enough to impress someone who's never actually played or with no music experience. You really just need to learn a few left-hand chord progressions of some pop songs and you're good to go. Hell, just learn basic chords and then bullcrap with your right hand. Sounds good and takes no practice. Juggling. This was the first thing that came to my mind. I learned juggling 40 years ago, self-taught with the help of a book. I've taught it to more people than I can count since. Clutch flags. Sort of like a human flagpole where you hold yourself sideways on a pole. This one is all technique though. I learned how to do it when I was a scrawny, weak 13-year-old. You can get a good bit of XP by hunting boars in the woods. Linux command line. I'm gonna hack the mainframe. mkdir mainframe, cd mainframe, I'm in. Acting. Step 1. Already have famous actor parents. Step 2. Become a professional actor. God damn it, my parents screwed me with step 1. Memorization. There's an awesome book called Moonwalking with Einstein that explains how to do it. The author entered a memory competition. Yes, that's actually a thing. They were a complete amateur. The participants had to memorize the order of like 3 or 4 decks of cards, and he won. Pretty interesting stuff. Listening in conversation. I'm not sure if I'd say it counts as a skill, but binary is a lot simpler than it looks. In base 10, which is normal or decimal numbers, you stay in the single digits until you hit 10, at which point the digit loops back to 0 and you add a 1 to the left. Binary, also known as base 2, is just like that, but 2 is the new 10, so it goes 0, 1, 10, 11, 100, 101, 110, 111, and so on and so forth. If you want to convert a long binary number to decimal, it's as simple as adding up the place values. Each 1 or 0 corresponds to 2 raised to a certain power. The rightmost digit is 2 to the 0th power, 1. To the left of that is 2 to the first power, 2. To the left of that is 2 to the second power, or 4, and so on and so forth. Keeping this in mind, if you add together all of the power values for columns with 1 in them, you get the base 10 value. For example, 101 has 1s in the places corresponding to 2 to the power of 0. The rightmost one in the binary number, and 2 to the power of 2, the leftmost one in the binary number. We skip 2 to the power of 1 because there's a 0 in that place. Since 2 to the power of 0 is 1, and 2 to the power of 2 is 4, we add 1 plus 4 and get 5. As for binary letters, those are just whatever the binary number corresponds to on an ASCII table, which you can just Google. For example, 1010010 in binary is 82. 82 on the ASCII table is a capital R. Therefore, 1010010 is a capital R. Listen, at the beginning of your little spiel, you said that was simple, but I just read all of that out loud, and I am no closer to learning binary now than I was at the beginning of your explanation. In fact, yeah, I have a nosebleed, and I've forgotten what my name is. Maybe it's just a me problem. Networking. Go to events, look at name tags, recognize the company names, go stand by that group of people, Wait for the opportunity to join conversations, or most likely they'll invite you in. You ask questions about the people and go from there. It's not hard. Doing a backflip on the ground is surprisingly easy if you're in somewhat good shape. I stumbled across a YouTube video where a gymnastics guy taught this flexibility coach a backflip, and they only showed like 8 attempts before he was absolutely nailing it. Either they omitted a bunch in the video, or it really is simple to pick up for some folks. I struggled with flip-flops after taking gymnastics for years as a kid though, so I have my doubts.
What's your "oh, so that's what it was for" moment that took you too long to find out? Those little green swords at Starbucks. I had no clue what they were used for until I was complaining one day that my coffee gets all over the lid when I walk. My friend grabbed one and stuck it in the top of the lid and asked why I didn't use a stopper. A stopper! Oh my god, my life has just changed. I just learned something too. Of course, I don't drink coffee, but anyway. I'm sure we're going to be learning a lot of things this video. Not me, but my dad. He always likes to look nice and put together. One day before church, I was maybe 14, I asked him if he had a lint roller. He got it for me and it was absolutely covered in lint. So I ripped off the top sheet. My dad's eyes widened in shock. I always thought lint rollers were so expensive for how few times you could use them. He never knew there were more sheets underneath. Dad was in his mid-50s then. He hates when I tell that story. When I realized that the division sign is an empty fraction. Dude, you just blew my mind. That the approximately correct amount of loose leaf tea for 1 cup is a teaspoonful. That one makes sense. Not sure if this is a feature on all smoke detectors, but finally after 5 years of owning my house and getting used to grabbing a chair and knocking the batteries out of it, I just hit the test button on the front when it went off while cooking. Hush mode activated. It turns it off for 15 minutes and automatically turns itself back on. It felt like unlocking a secret character in Mortal Kombat. For years, I've had this electrical outlet on my back porch that's really intermittent. The thing works about half the time, then stops working for a couple weeks. Really frustrating. About 6 years after I bought the house, I also figured out what that one switch in the living room does. You know the plastic hooks on vacuum cleaners that are used to wind the cord around? Well, the top hook will spin 180 degrees to release the cord, so you don't have to spend time unwinding. I didn't realize this till my wife showed me well into my 30s. It took me 4 years of owning a car to realize I could spray washer fluid onto the rear windshield. I just assumed it only sprayed the front, and I would occasionally throw a bucket of water on the back if I needed to. Then one day, I just noticed an odd symbol on a lever I hadn't seen before. Held that mother down for about 10 seconds before a massive gush of liquid burst out of the back and changed my life for the better. I feel like that last sentence out of context could really go the wrong way for you. Clapperboards in movies. They're used as a visual reference to sync the audio and the video together in editing. Have you guys seen those escalators with the green lights shining through the steps? When I was very young, maybe 5 or 6 years old, I asked my dad what those lights were for. He told me they were for the blind. A few years ago maybe, when I was about 23 or 24, I got on one of those escalators with lights again with a friend of mine. I wanted to tell my friend this little fact that my dad had told me years ago about the lights in escalators. But as soon as I wanted to explain, I realized my dad was trolling me the whole time. It took me just under 20 years to realize it. I think we all have that one thing that we were told as a kid that took us way too long to realize wasn't true. I was a housekeeper for someone years back when I was in college. Side job, extra money. I would see short straws in random places at the house where I worked. I usually just picked them up and threw it in the trash can. It took me 2 years to realize the person I worked for had a drug addiction and he was using the straws to snort. Now I look back and I'm glad I wore gloves to clean other people's houses. I bought a used pickup truck in the late 90s that had an electronic key fob like any car does these days. It had a couple other buttons as well that, when pressed, seemed to do nothing. I asked them about it at the dealership and they told me it was probably for a remote start that wasn't hooked up. After 2 years of driving that truck around in cold Chicago winters, I sold the truck to my brother when I bought my first new car. One day while talking to him, he started the car up with the remote starter. I stared in complete shock as he explained that you have to hold the button down. It's always a humbling moment when someone knows how to use something that was yours better than you do. I had no idea that salad spinners were to dry your salad. I thought they were to mix your salad dressing or something. We got one as a wedding gift. So I loaded one up, dumped some dressing in, and it spun a ton of the dressing off the salad. This made me think that the product was to apply dressing flavor to all of your salad bits without dealing with all the extra calories that come from overloading on the dressing. So naturally, I thought it was a total waste of time and money and tossed it into a cabinet to never be used again. A year goes by and I see a comment on Reddit about how salad spinners are such a game changer and so worth it. And I thought people were just crazy. Nope, I'm the idiot here. They're to dry your washed salad bits so you have nice, crisp, non-soggy salad. I had no idea, and the box sure as heck didn't tell me that. I worked with a guy on a construction site and it took him 7 months to realize that the porta potties had urinals in them. He thought that the bowl was in there for a sink that they put in the nicer ones. Just today at the gym, I forgot my shower sandals and I was like, oh sweet, they have disposable slippers just in case of such an event. I put them on and walked through the change room, used them, they worked well, until I realized that they were shower caps. I mean, you can use them for that. After high school, I was working a temp job in a business remodel. The wood floors had been put in and the contractor had a big roll of paper that he taped down to cover the floor to prevent scuffs and scrapes while the work continued. One time I touched the roll of paper and noted that it was somewhat sturdier than normal paper and reminded me of the craft paper that we used in elementary school. Then I remembered that as a child, the teacher always called it construction paper. The bagel button on toasters only toasts one side of the bagels or bread or buns. When I was a kid, I had a large toy box with a lid. I had to use my head to prop up the lid when I grabbed things. There was a place to put a stick to prop it open. I noticed that there was a stick kept in the kitchen for me and my brother's spankings. By the time I realized the stick was originally meant for the toy box, I had outgrown the toy box. Your parents were essentially beating you with your toys? That's kinda messed up. The wiggly metal bracket on the end of a tape measure is like that on purpose. The amount it wiggles matches its thickness, so you can take inside measurements and push it in, or outside measurements and pull it out, and you'll get consistent measurements. I lived in the US for a year, and I was really annoyed about our light switches. They didn't lead to any lamps. There were no lamps in the ceiling at all, and I couldn't figure out why we had switches on the wall. I was also super annoyed that a few sockets worked sometimes, but not all the time. I never talked to our landlord because frankly, he scared me. And since I was moving back soon, I just figured I'd live with it. Fast forward 11 months when I visited a friend's house. I couldn't turn on her big floor lamp. Just do it like this, she said, and flipped the light switch on the wall. It turns out in America, light switches can lead to sockets in the wall. I can see how that would be incredibly frustrating to someone who's not used to it. For years, I thought those weird storage pod thingies some cars and vans have on the top of the roof were mini canoes. As in, I kinda thought that until I was like 24, but was too nervous to ask anyone. Since as long as I can remember, my mom has kept this creepy doll hung up on our wall in our garage, right next to the door to go into the house. The thing's a real eyesore. Clothes are ugly and it's just this raggedy thing. So recently, I asked my mom why the heck she keeps this ugly demon doll hung up on the wall, and she says, "Really? It holds plastic bags." She walks up to it and pulls a plastic grocery bag out of its butt. 19 years in that house and I always thought my mom just had some weird taste in decoration. To be fair, you could use anything as a plastic bag dispenser. It doesn't need to be this creepy doll. I think your mom's taste is still a little off. That I did not need to put eggs in the refrigerator egg holder one by one. That instead, I could put it on top of the eggs in the case and simply flip it over. Well, yeah, but then all your eggs are upside down. That dryer sheets prevent static cling. I always assumed you put them in to make your clothes smell better. So when I moved out, I just never bought any. Then one day I had to do laundry at my mom's house. In the middle of switching the laundry, I'm complaining about the socks all stuck to the blanket. And my mom says, "Well, put in a dryer sheet, dummy." Oh, so that's what those are for. Those travel toothbrushes. I always carried one on me and always wondered why they made them so tiny. Until one day on vacation with my girlfriend, I'm using it and she says, "Why don't you use it normally?" Then she grabs the casing for the toothbrush and attaches it to the bottom of the brush. Mind blown. I always wondered why there was a G in the stylized Disney logo, and it honestly took me like 15 years to figure out it was a D the whole time, and I was just an idiot. So I was a first-year medical student and was late to class and ran in sweating through my Oxford shirt and khakis. The lecturer was some esteemed local windbag cardiologist. As I sat down, he stated very grandly, "The most important part of the stethoscope is the part between the earpieces." I took my stethoscope out and started looking at the little spring thing that connected the two earpieces together, trying to figure out why that little cheap part was so important. After way longer than it should have, it occurred to me that he was talking about the doctor's brain, and dropped my stethoscope like it was hot and hoped no one saw me examining the little spring thing. Condensed soup. I always wondered why the cans were smaller yet tasted super salty and were thick. I never took the time to read the instructions about how you're supposed to add water. I went 39 years without knowing. One day, I finally asked my wife, and after she stopped laughing, she explained it to me. Growing up, my mother raised me to never look in her purse because it was rude to rifle through other people's belongings. At 7 years old, I felt like a rebel and looked through her purse while she was out gardening. I found her lipstick, wallet, and an odd-shaped canister that looked like perfume. I figured, let's give it a shot, and sprayed some all over me, mostly my face. What I didn't realize was that it was pepper spray. I ran around screaming in utter pain. Lesson learned. I mean, she tried to warn ya. When I was a kid, my grandfather and I built a model of the 1989 Batmobile together. We worked so hard to get it together. With neither of us having built models before, it took hours. We finished up and we had one green piece left. We looked through the instructions and looked all over the model. Could not figure it out. Finally, I went and got my grandma to see if she could figure it out. She came in, took one look, and it was the top of the superglue. We had forgotten to recap the superglue. You must never forget about the piece of resistance. Took me an embarrassingly long time to realize that movie is referring to a moving picture. It's an old-fashioned term, similar to talkie. The metal square thing on a stapler can be turned around so the prongs of the staple go outwards instead of inwards. It's a lot better for temporary staples, much easier to undo. I was at an antenatal class with my wife when the instructor shared a tip for making sure you let your baby feed from each breast an equal amount, by taking it in turns left and right which one you start off with. How do you remember which one you started with? You use a hair tie. A few minutes later, she remarked, "And don't forget to put the hair tie on your other wrist when you next do a feed." To which I remarked, rather too audibly for a room of 20 strangers, "Oh, you put it on your wrist." Oops, I was a bit slow that day, and many other days. For a split second while reading this, I thought the same thing. That the pockets on suit coats and blazers and back pockets of slacks are loosely stitched closed and meant to be cut open. I spent 4 years of my life as a ticked-off pragmatist. Why the heck would you put pockets just for show? Those jerks. One day, a friend heard my incessant complaining and goes, you just make a small snip and pull the thread out, then the pockets are accessible. I go to the closet and snip open one of the pockets. Well, don't I feel stupid? I had just bought my first house and needed to patch a hole in the bathroom fan exhaust duct in the attic. I was walking around Lowe's thinking, I wonder what sort of tape I should use for ducks. Then it hit me. Duct tape for ducks. Thank you, my friend. I never put that together. Potato peelers have a little indentation on the end of them. It's used to scoop out the black parts of potatoes that you don't want to eat. My mind alternates in this thread from, I didn't know that and it's really cool, to how the heck did someone not know that? Pipe cleaners. When I was a kid, they were used for crafts and stuff, and I just figured that they were used to clean like kitchen pipes. In my kid brain, that kinda made sense. As I grew up, I just never really thought about it again. Then one day in college, I decide cigars are expensive and pipe tobacco seems much cheaper overall. Plus, the rustic feel of a man on his porch reading with a tobacco pipe always appealed to me for some reason. So I went out and bought a cheap tobacco pipe, and while I was checking out, the cashier asked me if I wanted pipe cleaners. The scales just dropped from my eyes. It took 20 plus years to learn that pipe cleaners were used to clean, pipes. I've been driving my Chevy Silverado for 9 years before I realized I could lower the seat height. It had been at max elevation the entire time. First time in the past decade I've been able to see the sky out of my windshield while driving. Q-tips. I'm British. We don't call them Q-tips. And I didn't know what they were until I was in my mid-20s and saw a meme with a photo of a Q-tip. I was genuinely shocked. People never actually use them in books or films. They just say stuff like, "I think you need a Q-tip," if someone misunderstands something. I thought it was like saying, "get a clue," and I'd always just assumed Q-tips were a reference to some kind of American game show. This one's just a cultural difference and a very easy mistake to make. Don't worry, we understand. In the song I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus, it's Daddy dressed up as Santa Claus. I didn't realize this until my late 30s. Yeah, the song takes on a whole new meaning when you realize Mom and Dad are just doing a little role play. Grapes on the front of raisin packages. My girlfriend told me last year that raisin and grapes are the same thing, and I laughed it off because that's nonsense. Then I saw a big grape on my raisin box. Yes, and I'm 33 years old. I never got the euphemism of Blink-182's album, "Take off your pants and jacket." I just thought it was a dude getting ready for bed or something, not taking off your pants and jacking it. That makes total sense considering the band. My boyfriend was around 21 when I had to explain this to him, but he asked me to have dinner at his parents' house and I asked what we were having, and he said roast beast, and I laughed at him making a Grinch joke, and then he asked me what I was talking about. I mentioned that he called roast beef roast beast, and that the Grinch reference was funny, and I realized he seriously had no idea what I was talking about. So I had to reveal to my boyfriend that roast beast is not an actual thing. It's called roast beef, and roast beast was strictly a Dr. Seuss reference. He was a little embarrassed, but it was really actually so adorable. I have a similar one to this in that I called it grilled cheese for the longest time instead of grilled cheese. It's just the way my ear heard it for some reason. I know it doesn't make sense. I learned at 27 how to properly clean a toaster. I didn't know there was a trap door at the bottom of it. I showed an Ivy League friend of mine and their mind was blown. You know, we all have gaps in knowledge sometimes, and sometimes they overlap with your friend. The fact that pineapples don't grow on trees. They're just plants. I didn't know this until I was hanging out with my friend and we were swimming in her pool. I got out and pointed to what looked to me to be a weird spiky looking plant, and she looked at me completely dumbfounded. She just looked at me and said in a disappointed voice, "That's a pineapple." I felt like my whole life at this point was just a lie. For the longest time, I genuinely thought pineapples grew on trees. That the reason baby vests have envelope shoulders is so that when they do a poop that explodes all over the vest, you can remove the vest downwards instead of lifting it over their head and smearing poop all over their face. When you first walk into a Home Depot, there's always a stack of orange buckets by the entrance. And for the longest time, I thought they were Home Depot's equivalent of a shopping basket. I'd haul that thing around just throwing screws and hardware into it and then just put it next to the cash register when I was done. They'd always ask if I wanted the bucket too, and I just thought it was a clever way of selling more buckets. Only about a month ago did I realize they're just buckets, and everyone at Home Depot just thought I was mentally imbalanced. Hey, you know what? You're making use of it. I'm not going to fault you on that one. When I finally figured out why Dad's special cigarettes smelled so different from regular cigarettes, then his room full of blacklights, incense, psychedelic art, and old-fashioned pipes made a lot of sense. I got my driver's license while only using the clutch pedal for driving in reverse. I didn't even know you had to use your accelerator until my girlfriend pointed it out after having my license for over a year. I would think the instructor would have caught that one, but I guess that's on them, not you. When I was little, I was fascinated by TV guides. I thought shows on television were just aired totally at random. I used to stare at the TV guides and whisper, "How do they know?" The image of this one is just kinda cute. As a toddler, I always loved it in church when we'd sing about some bear named Gladly, and who happened to be cross-eyed. Every time it painted a cute picture in my child mind. A cuddly teddy bear with crossed eyes and a sweet smile. I'll never forget the disappointment of learning to read and opening the hymn book for the first time to Gladly the Cross-Eyed Bear. I had to explain to a friend of mine who was 19 at the time that large people were obese, not a beast. I have earbud headphones, and where the cord splits, there was this slider thing. The whole time I thought it was something to adjust the length or something. Then I found myself untangling my headphones, and I said to myself, if these two ends didn't split up, things wouldn't be so bad. Then it hit me. That sliding thing was there to keep the ends together and stop it from getting tangled. Some people also use it to just tighten it up to your chin if you're going to be moving around and working out or something, but that's one way to use it too, I guess. Not me, but my brother. He would have been around 15 at the time. We were at an amusement park in line for lunch. My mother turns to him and asks what he wants. He pauses for a sec, then says, "I want a cheeseburger, but with no cheese." At this point, I do what any older brother does and start to laugh a little bit and ask him the question again. Same response. At this point, he knows he's doing something stupid. So I ask him, "You mean a hamburger, right?" He says, "I don't want ham." You know, I can see how that could be misleading though.
What are your dating regrets? Getting so caught up in the fun early stages of the relationship and planning activities for dates that I forgot to just relax and be myself. Take it a week at a time and see how things went. Pretty sure it made me seem too pushy, so things didn't end very well for me. Lesson learned. Chill the F out. The holy trinity of bad dating. 1. Not listening when they told me they weren't interested. 2. Not listening when they told me they were crazy. 3. Not listening to myself when I realized I didn't want to be with someone anymore. This is the first time I've ever spelled it out for myself like this, and I think I'm seeing a pattern.
That I admittedly hid some of my hobbies and interests because I was scared they looked dorky. As soon as I stopped hiding it, I met my partner.
Don't be afraid to share your hobbies or your interests to your girlfriend, boyfriend, significant other, whatever. Just, if they like you for who you are. And if they don't like you because of something as silly as a hobby or an interest that you have, then they don't really like you. Not taking chances with various girls and women throughout my life when I had the opportunities to. And I didn't try to date more in my early 20s, and now I'm in my mid-30s with a combined relationship experience of a little over a year. I basically have the romantic intelligence of a 16-year-old.
Shooting more shots and being way more confident in my 20s. I was a very good-looking guy with very low self-esteem. Funny to look back at now I'm 46.
So far, my biggest regret was moving halfway across the country with someone, and when I was struggling to adjust to that location, they refused to move a few hours for me to a different location. That really hurt. Felt like I gave up so much for them, and it turns out they wouldn't do the same for me. I'll never move for love again. Another thing about this relationship, and a warning to others, is that if a person says they hadn't spent enough time being single before y'all got together, just break it off so they can do their thing. While it might be hard to give up on something good, the feeling of regret for not getting to experience more opportunities and meet more people will constantly be in the back of their head. I could go on, but the point is to have clear communication. That also means that if someone tells you something, actually listen to what they're saying and don't just hear what you want to hear. I always used to say, always give them at least one date to make their case, and you can decide after if you want to continue. Some people are so obviously a walking red or black flag of personality issues that even a single afternoon will be too much time to waste. Just decline and move on. 2. Don't stay with someone because of how they used to make you feel or because you owe them for something they did a long time ago. Staying in a dying relationship doesn't make breaking up later any better and doesn't make you happy now. Also, not my personal mess up, but marriage and or kids won't fix a weak relationship. If it's dying and nobody really cares, get it over with and move on. Number 3. Not mine, but I've seen it firsthand enough. Some people have issues, and while these aren't deal breakers themselves, you shouldn't enter into a dating relationship for the purpose to be free of therapy or to fix them/date people that will fix you. People need to be in a place where they are able to date others, not go looking for someone to fix them or prey on broken people. And if you are with someone that becomes too much baggage, you can stay to help, you can leave if it gets above your pay grade, but you have to make sure you are taken care of too.
I give this a 7 out of 10.
Solid advice.
The fact that I'm not very good at it.
Giving my best to the wrong person.
Letting them get away with bad behaviors. Being overly romantic and giving to someone who doesn't do the same. Overly apologizing even when I didn't do anything inherently wrong. Begging someone to stay.
I screwed over someone who truly loved me. Pushed her away when it was my time to step up. I'll regret that for the rest of my life. She was such a catch. Married now. I should have been more open about my feelings with those I was interested in back around high school and early adulthood because I'm pretty sure a few may have been interested in me, but things just never got started. I should have cut communication once I found out she had been cheating on me since the start of our relationship, instead of doing some on-again, off-again bullcrap for a decade or so. You know, as someone who's personally witnessed very many on-again, off-again relationships, they are one of the most frustrating things to bear witness to, especially when your friend goes from top of the world to as low as can possibly be in such a short amount of time. And now, I'm not saying that people can't make mistakes in relationships, get back together, and then, actually learn from that mistake and be better, but, you need to have a certain degree of self-awareness and recognize what the actual issues are. Like, if you're sat at home, you're like, damn, I want to get back with my girl, or damn, I want to get back with my man, just have a freaking anime character arc for at least 5 months or something. Think about what the actual issues were. Think about yourself. Think about them. Judge whether or not it's worth it. Let that anime character arc really set in, Despite many warnings from people trying to help me, I put all my eggs in the same basket. Married young and devoted myself to someone thinking that devotion would always be reciprocated. But apparently people change even if you don't. Always be prepared for the other shoe to drop, I guess is my advice. Kinda cynical, I know, but recent experiences taught me a lesson I never wanted to learn. Went on a really great date recently. We really hit it off. We were at this bar until closing, just talking. He wanted to come back to mine, and I thought, hey, he seems really sweet, and we are having a lot of fun together. Why not? He stays up for hours talking and laughing, and we wind up doing it. We continued talking even after that, and we were up until 6 a.m. The next day, I wrote, hey, had a great time. I'd be happy to see you again. And he said he also had a great time and how fun I was, but he didn't want to date because he didn't feel it. I was sad, but you can't help it. I asked if he wanted to be friends, and days go by. He ends up just reading the message. No response. I know it's a stereotype for men to do this kind of thing, but I actually have never experienced this before. I've only had guys be really upfront and honest, or I could tell they were just trying to get in my pants. So now I'm left embarrassed and feel slightly used. So I regret that. Dating someone who always wanted things their way, my life scheduled around what they wanted to do, thinking they would change and it would balance out in time. They were selfish and self-centered. That was the core issue, not a scheduling one. I wish I would never have been exposed to this hookup culture, being made to believe that once I was of legal drinking age that I need to go and have one-night stands, etc. I'm so numb inside that I just continued to date and I don't know how to attach. I'm pretty convinced at this point I wouldn't know love if it slapped me in the face. Well, that is, geez. That made me kind of sad. I had not one, not two, but 3 girls I had huge crushes on out their feelings for me on the last day of high school before moving on to college elsewhere, essentially saying, you should have asked me out. Never could pick up on signals. Ended up meeting my wife and mother of my 3 kids almost 15 years now on a dating app after college, so it all worked out for the better. That I should have jumped at the chance with my current girlfriend 6 years ago. We went to the movies as friends and I really liked her. She casually asked me if I actually wanted to date her. I said that she was a catch, but I was too old for her. I really didn't want to be the creepy older guy, so we are now together 6 years later because I at least had enough social skills not to mess up the friendship in the meantime. Dating someone I liked the idea of but not being into them. She was a professional, a grown adult who could communicate her desires. She was enthusiastic about her sex and very much enjoyed one another's company. We would have been fantastic friends with benefits. I just wasn't that into her and she was into me. I knew it, but rather than being fair to her and ending it on transitioning to a friends with benefits situation, I kept it going. Eventually, she dumped me because she was jealous of my female friends. Nothing was going on, but she recognized that they were harming her mental health and didn't want to put up with seeing photos of me hanging out with them. I don't regret anything because I believe you make the choices right for you at the time based on the information you are presented with. Dating her taught me that it's not fair to treat people like that, and I was voluntarily single for 5 years, rather than date people I was only casually interested in. I learned a lot from her, so no regrets, but I do wish I had ended it better. Being too afraid to look like a fool.
Only dated superficially, so dated lots of women I didn't actually have things in common with. Invented a single me and a boyfriend me. Do not do this. Always ended up being a boy toy and not a boyfriend and not speaking up about it. My biggest dating regret is expecting the character of my dating options to be better than my own level of personal development. I guess this person means that they always expected the person they were dating to be more mature or just know better than them. I'm not quite sure what they mean. I feel like I've got an inkling of what they are talking about, but I'm not quite there. Chasing. As a woman, pursuing men always felt wrong, but sadly, I've always had to do it because I'm painfully average and invisible. I could stand in front of a beige wall and you'd only see a beige wall. It leads to nothing great anyway. I always end up with someone who's desperately in love with, you guessed it, a very beautiful woman I will never be like. I am someone you pick only if you've made peace with the fact that the one you want will never be yours, so you've decided to settle for less. Dating is absolutely crap for me. If I knew that I'd have to do all the chasing and all the work and all the pathetic attempts to be the best version of myself, which still isn't good enough, I'd have never dated a man. Being alone and asexual isn't all that bad. Okay, you I feel very bad for because it sounds like your confidence has been utterly crushed, and I don't believe anyone deserves to feel that way, especially about their physical appearance, which you just can't help. I had several relationships with very insecure and unstable people with a lot of mental illnesses, and I can say out of all of the crap that I lived through so far, these relationships were the absolute worst part of it. I was always just too open-minded and tolerant, especially knowing how hard life can be with aforementioned issues, and didn't want to close the door to the potential person of my life. But after my last disaster of a partner, I don't even have enough trust in other people left to consider a relationship with them. I slightly regret hamming it up so much in the video earlier on because, damn, this is getting kind of dire and sad. I tried dating 2 girls once. I couldn't handle splitting my emotions, so I dumped one and committed to the other. That girl dumped me, and the other girl wouldn't date me again. Comedy. Oh, also I remember bringing girls to my room when I was younger, them laying in my bed with me and me not doing anything because I was just a little too respectful. Didn't end up with the vast majority of them. One even bluntly commented on how I should have made moves. Cringe, man. I matched with this girl on Tinder a few years back. In our conversation, she told me she was on a temporary visit in the country and that she's staying at a hotel. We agreed we'd meet outside the hotel and go for a drink of coffee at a nearby Starbucks. When I reached the front of the hotel, she didn't exactly walk out of the hotel, but in fact, someone had dropped her at the hotel. That was the first red flag. As I greet her and introduce myself, I suggest we walk for a bit and make our way to Starbucks, but she was adamant of a nearby cafe that she's pointed out across the street, and I was like, okay, sure, why not? The rest of the day was comprised of just getting to know her and what she's doing here on a visit, and while this was happening, she proceeded to order wine numerous times and kept walking back and forth to the restroom. Second red flag. And by the end of our 2-hour-long date, the bill came, and I presume it was going to be at least a 100+ billing, but to my shock, it ended up costing me $560 plus, and I reluctantly paid for it as it is customary where I'm from that guys pay the bill if you're the one who invited the person to the date. And when the bill was paid, she wanted to go clubbing, and I told her, sure, let's meet tomorrow night and go, but I just ended up blocking her and deleting her contact info. I found out later that this is a common scam that happens in my country, and apparently the cafe and her are both in cahoots. She drags in the victims, and the cafe artificially inflates the prices of their menu to overcharge me. The worst part? This was the first date I ever went on, and it took a lot of courage for me to put myself out there, and after that date, it frickin' broke me, and I felt so violated that I haven't gone on a date since. Not dating in my 20s, for one. My early life was something of a sob story because of a butthole doctor in my teens. I had a serious, life-threatening illness when I was a teenager, but we caught it in time and treated it. But this doctor told my mom point-blank right in front of me, "You realize he's going to die from this, right? This kid won't live to see 30. This will probably come back and we won't be able to treat it." Mom fired him from my case after that and a few horrible missteps of bedside manner. I'm 44 before, by the way, and fine, it never came back, but it screwed me up for years. I lived my late teens and 20s like I was gonna die soon. I didn't invest anything in my life. I lived it up. I partied. I screwed around a lot. Why would I bother getting into a relationship if I was going to die? I mean, sure, I dated a couple times, but nothing more than a couple months, and the problem was, I got so used to being alone and self-sufficient that when I got into my 30s, I tried to date more, but lacked a lot of relationship skills, and just really struggled being a part of a couple. Being a partner. Cheating. Don't do it, kids. It's not worth it. I've loved 4 women in my life and not a single one of them would look my way, and knowing it's my fault makes it 100 times worse. I'm sorry, Amanda. Not researching the guy first. There was a guy I went on a few dates with last year. Really liked him. He ended up dating someone else. A few nights ago, I decided to find out his last name because he never told me. When I found out his last name and looked him up online, I found articles about how he sexually assaulted a 7-year-old girl he was babysitting. The dude only served 4 months. I dodged an absolute missile. God damn it, where are the Gary Plochets of the world when you need them? I'm 22 and I've yet to date anyone, so I guess my biggest regret in dating would be not having dated anyone. I suffered something I've always called the weirdness, which is me bottling things up and ending up in major anxious episodes which have destroyed relationships and made some very difficult. It also created either an over-attachment or rejection of people. My style is anxious preoccupied attachment, and it's the first time in 46 years I've been able to give the weirdness a proper name. I regret not hooking up with women before meeting my boyfriend. I feel like he's the one, got me, so I will never know what it's like to sleep with a woman, and it does make me sad sometimes. I also feel like a threesome would ruin our relationship, so that's out of the question. You know, that's absolutely wonderful. I'm really happy that you think this guy is the one, and good luck running away from your gay thoughts. Taking back my ex after she cheated. Don't ever do that. It'll never be the same. So many, either not understanding that they're not interested or worse, not understanding that they are interested. I could have lost my virginity years before if my teenage brain wasn't immune to logic and not so subtle hints. On the other hand, I'm beginning to be a believer of the theory that somehow my life is how it should be. If I had gotten together with that sexy girl that threw herself at me when my friend wanted to leave, I probably would have been a father at 19, which never in my life looked or looks as a good idea. I have too many. One is simply that I took too long to start doing it and then wasn't very good at it and struggled with it for years. I didn't date in high school or even try, and then in college I found myself getting a little older and having none of the experience that most of my peers seem to have. I eventually ended up in a relationship with an older, 30-ish woman with kids. I want to be clear, I don't think that relationship was in any way exploitive, but it just wasn't right for me in the long run, and I never had the experience of having a normal college girlfriend. Maybe it was out of reach for me. I don't know. After that, there were a lot of dry spells. Not just sex-wise, in terms of dating. It eventually worked out and I'm married, but I just wish the road there was easier. I don't know why I needed to go through so many rough, lonely patches. There is a particular situation that haunts me though. I had a date that went well. We were both in our mid-20s. To set the stage here, a lunch/coffee date turned into, hey, let's walk around for a while, which turned into going to an art museum, which eventually turned into getting dinner because we'd spent a lot of the day together. We seemed to have a good vibe and I thought things were going really well. Unfortunately, because of what you can infer from my first paragraph about my own timidity with dating, I eventually sought out a lot of advice, mostly on the internet, that turned out to be not great. I had been used to asking girls if they wanted me to kiss them at the end of a date, but I'd gotten the feedback that a lot of women would find that to be too timid compared to just going for it, and therefore a turnoff, that it seemed too weak. So I finally reasoned, hey, this is going well, as we went to the train and departed. I leaned in and kissed her. After I pulled back, I realized she was mortified. We walked away, but since our respective trains were not showing up yet, I decided to walk back to her and ask if she was okay. She explained that while she was okay, she was incredibly embarrassed because she had never been kissed before. I felt horrible. The train station was hardly the best setting for someone's first kiss, but also I hadn't realized she was so nervous about it and may not have wanted to do it that quickly. We talked a bit afterwards, but our messaging eventually petered out. A lot of friends, including women, told me that while yes, I probably should have asked, I shouldn't feel too bad about it, and that it was probably just her embarrassment, that it may have even been a relief for her in the long run that she got it over with. But I still feel horrible and still wish sometimes I could find her again and apologize. Asking a 22-year-old who looked like Nicole Kidman if I could use her back door. The next day she slapped me and never spoke to me again. Oh my. Trying to be the cool GF. As a teenage girl in the dating world, people see setting boundaries as the crazy GF who doesn't let their partner do anything. So I wanted to refrain from that as far as possible because I was 15 going on 16 trying to impress this 18-year-old. Boy, was I wrong. We needed those boundaries. I let him walk all over me so much for the first 6 months of our relationship that setting up boundaries in later time was a lot harder and frustrating for both of us. I'm now 17 turning 18, and even though it's only been 2 years, I'm really happy with my progression and sense of awareness. So many signals I didn't respond to because I thought, what if I'm wrong? 1. Persevering too long with someone who wasn't good to me because even though he treated me terribly, we could have so much fun together. 2. Then having learned my lesson, persevering too long with someone who was good to me because even though we never had much fun together, he treated me well. Finally, I realized that I had overcorrected and I met my husband who both treats me well and who I can have fun with. Plenty of other guys in there too, but I don't regret any of them. I regret taking my early dating life so seriously. We all know we're not marrying our high school partners. I should have prioritized my enjoyment of fleeting opportunities when they presented themselves because 40-year-old me isn't getting the chance to make out with Amanda Davino under the bleachers at the Friday night football game ever again. My regrets were that I struggled with social anxiety and depression during my prime years, so I forfeited much of the fun, i.e. dating, sex, relationships, that I likely would have otherwise had if I were not so marginalized by those issues. My late teens and all through my 20s and 30s were a dull blur. Kids, it's important you don't waste your life. And I don't mean do dangerous, stupid things. You should still think about what you're doing, but for the love of God, don't waste your life.
What's your horror story with bad parenting from strangers? I'll start. I'm in line at the DMV today, and I see a mom who looks, honestly, maybe 35 years old, tops. She has what can only be a 14-year-old daughter with a skin-tight t-shirt with what little cleavage she has on display, along with shorts cut so short that her butt is hanging out. This girl's on her cell phone just yelling up a storm at whoever she's talking to. It's straight out of Maury Povich, because the best part is her mom is dressed exactly the same. Her 3-year-old son is running around screaming at the top of his lungs, bumping into people, and at one point I turn my back and he runs up and hits me on the back of the leg. I had the audacity to ask the mother to watch her kid, and I get a huge mind your own business rant. She then proceeds to place him in a stroller, give him a Pepsi and some flaming hot Cheetos. Where on earth have all the parents gone? Why is it more important to be friends with your kid? What would you have done? As a side note, when she yelled at me to mind my own business, I said, fair enough. Her reply, yeah, that's right. I honestly just laughed out loud. What else can you do in that situation? If she's not going to parent the kids, it's not like you can. I used to work at a sandwich shop and there was a man in line with his son. The little boy was a bit bouncy and kept tugging on the man's arm saying, "Daddy, I need to potty real bad." And the dad would say, "In a minute, son." This went on for like 5 minutes and the little boy says, "Daddy, I have to potty now." And the man all of a sudden turns to the son and backhands him across the face and yells at him, "I told you to wait a minute." And the boy bursts into tears. My manager was right there and she was in a fury. She started yelling at the guy that he was a jerk and a horrible person and told him to get the heck out of her store and never come back. The guy was like, "Mind your own business. This is my kid and I can do what I want." And she said, "Leave now before I call the police." So the man hitched the boy up by his arm and practically dragged him out of the store. The worst part, they were less than 10 feet from the bathroom the entire time. That poor kid. I hope that kid ended up peeing all over the inside of Dad's car, because you know what? He deserves it. I used to babysit for a very dysfunctional family. The mom got knocked up on purpose so the dad wouldn't leave her. Subsequently, the dad hated the mom and resented the child. I know this because they fought about it often, publicly, and in front of the child. When I would arrive, the baby would always have a very dirty diaper that had obviously been like that for many hours. The baby's first word was her own name and then my name. Not mama or dada, her own 3 freaking syllable name. One day, the child had no milk or baby food left, and the mom goes to the store and comes back with just a pack of cigarettes. I asked her why she didn't get anything for the baby, and she said, "Well, I didn't have enough for both and I don't get paid till Friday." It was Wednesday and she was just gonna let the kid go hungry for 3 days. There was nothing edible in the house. I absolutely lost it. I don't think I've ever raged out on someone so bad in my entire life. I let her have it for a good 10 minutes, screaming at the top of my lungs the litany of reasons why she was a failure as a parent, and how I was gonna call CPS if things didn't change. Anyways, she burst into tears and took the cigarettes back and came home with milk. So I guess it kinda worked. I ended up making pureed veggies at home and bringing them to the little girl for the rest of the week. They moved away shortly after that, and I always wondered what happened to the little girl. Let's just hope that your reality check to her had a long-term impact. I teach first graders, and I'm convinced most parents should not be raising children. Here's my most recent story. One day, I start afternoon class and I ask my students how they're doing. One girl says bad, and I ask her why. She says that she's hungry because she didn't eat lunch. I ask her why she hasn't had lunch yet, and she says it's because her mom was playing on the computer and she forgot to feed them, and then didn't have time. How the heck do you forget to feed a 7-year-old? Later, I brought her a snack when I had a minute because there's no way I could let a kid go without food. Unfortunately, it's always the kid that suffers in these situations. I recently had an encounter from the other end of the spectrum. I was cycling through the downtown area when I passed this Chinese lady who let her tiny kid, I'm guessing around 3 or 4 years old, walk on the street side of her. And just as I passed, this kid is making some excited gestures at his mom, happily gibbering about something while simultaneously pretty much running backwards right into the side of me, while I'm cycling at full speed. He goes flying backwards. I'm pretty sure I hit him right in the face with my knee. I stop, horrified, to check if the kid is okay. He's making this face like he's inhaling a huge breath of air to start bawling. But before I can get off the cycle or he can start screaming, his mom looks back, sees what's going on, and just snips a few words of Chinese at him. The kid just looks at her and instantly regains his composure, with obvious effort. I'm pretty sure he's hurt, but he quietly just runs right back up to her. The lady just smiles and waves at me and walks off at a brisk pace with her kid, and I'm just left standing there looking completely stumped at the bystanders who seem just as confused. That kid is going to grow up tough, even if it kills him. I'm pretty sure his mom's going to make sure of that. At the end of the day, kids will be kids and accidents happen. Things like this sometimes can't be avoided. Mom was probably of the mind that if she just doesn't acknowledge it as a bad thing, the kid won't either and they can just move on. If he was really hurt, he would have let you guys know. I used to work at a crappy gas station / convenience store. One day, a woman comes up to the counter with her daughter. She places on the counter hot dogs, hot dog buns, Kraft mac and cheese, and a 6-pack of Corona. She then asks me for a pack of cigarettes. After ringing up all the items, she swipes her debit card and it doesn't go through. She tries several times. After about the 4th time, she turns to this little girl who couldn't be older than 6. And I kid you not, she says, "Looks like you won't be eating tonight," and walks away, leaving her little girl at the counter tearing up. I was dumbfounded, and before I could say anything, the little girl yells to me, "You're a big meanie," and ran out of the door crying. Worst Thanksgiving ever. I mean, she could have tried putting some stuff back to see if it would go through at that point. Maybe the beer and cigarettes. You know, just priorities. While queuing in a coffee shop in England, 2 police officers walked in the door and went straight up to the agitated-looking woman in front of me. They started questioning her about her son, asking when she had last seen him, how old he was, what he was wearing, things like that. So it was fairly evident from the conversation that she had quite recently lost her 6-year-old kid. Both officers kept confusedly looking around the shop until the woman felt obliged to explain why she was in there, saying, "I'm gonna look for him. I'm getting me and my husband a coffee first. Go on ahead, we'll catch up. After picking up my order, I turned around to see them both sitting at a table drinking their coffees like not even a single care was given. As I walked out the door, I saw the woman peer out the front window, looking for her son, I suppose. Yeah, she doesn't seem to have as much urgency as you would think, does she? I was at the store with my dad, and we see this woman take her baby's bottle and pour Mountain Dew into it before giving it back to the kid. This is a baby, no more than a year old. My dad goes up to the lady and asks if she really just gave Mountain Dew to the kid, and she replies, "Yeah, he likes it, so I give it to him. I always give him what he wants." I fear for that generation. I was at the mall once and there was a young family in front of me. The little brat in the high chair didn't like the cheeseburger from McDonald's they got him. So he wailed and screamed and then picked up the cheeseburger and threw it at the dad, painting his shirt with ketchup and mustard. The dad then went up and got the kid another meal. I remember thinking, if I did that to my dad, I wouldn't have made it out of the mall alive. Look, sometimes you gotta discipline your kid. I get it, they're your kid, but you can't let them get away with stuff like this. You're not doing them any favors. I saw a kid, probably 5 or 6, walking with his dad to soccer practice. They walk to one pitch and there's no one there, and the kid says, "Oh, sorry, we're over there," pointing to another field, maybe 150 yards away. The dad slaps the kid on the back of the head and calls him stupid and other names. Some kids have no chance. Like, come on, that's such a small mistake and you're gonna go ahead and smack the kid for it? Who's being the child in that situation? I went to a barbecue thrown by a friend of a friend. There was a woman who showed up with their ex-husband and his new girlfriend. All three were drunk and a bit too friendly with each other, while alternating name-calling. With them was a 2 or 3-year-old little girl, cute as can be with a real light about her. I vaguely remember them telling very inappropriate stories. When the little girl says she's hungry, the father goes and gets the bag of McDonald's he'd been grazing out of and pulls out a near-full container of fries. He proceeds to grab a few and then throw them on the lawn. The girl, without missing a beat, runs around picking them up off the lawn and eats them. He repeats this over and over in front of all the other adults, who didn't seem to take issue. It was like a game to him that he was clearly enjoying. Mom even smiled at it. My wife and I promptly left the party. This guy's treating his daughter like an animal. Someone needs to call CPS. I was lining up at the register at some store, and there was a girl around 10ish and her mom in front of me. And the little girl asked her mom if she can get the Harry Potter books because they're on sale. And the mom replies, "Why do you need the stupid books for? We got a big television you can watch the movies on." God forbid some kids want to read nowadays. I worked at the YMCA in Houston, and we did programs that reached lower-income neighborhoods, the kind full of crime and poverty. One day we were letting the kids go, and we watched the rides leave as a security issue. One of the kids had made a drawing earlier that he was particularly proud of, and showed it to his dad, gleaming. The dad immediately snatched it out of the boy's hand, ripped up the drawing, and smacked the kid, in full view of us employees. He went on about how he shouldn't be doing homosexual stuff like drawing, and smacked him a couple more times. Needless to say, we called the authorities and he was arrested for child abuse, or something similar. How does this man think he's gonna get away with something like that in full view of everyone who's very much interested in this kid's well-being? I've been a nanny for a little over 5 years, so I've seen my fair share of crazy families. But there's one babysitting job that sticks out more than any other. The ex's mom referred me to her hairdresser, so when she called me, I was pretty excited to go to her house. I was watching a 4-year-old boy that everyone raved about being so adorable and fun. He sure was cute, but fun is not the word I would use to describe that night. She left telling me she would be home anywhere between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. Came home at 4 a.m. and got mad at me for falling asleep on the couch. The kid had the worst ADHD I've ever experienced before, and there was absolutely no food or drink in the fridge, other than margarita mix and a 2-week-old half-gallon of milk, which he said he drank earlier that day. All of the sippy cups that they owned smelled like rotten eggs. I felt so bad for this boy. I looked through every drawer to see if I could find anything to give him, and all I managed to find was workout supplements, steroids, needles, and lots of different pills like phentermine and ephedrine. I bought him some dinner, got them a fresh gallon of milk, and never came back to that house again. Another case of the parents are crappy people and the kid suffers. We went to a soft play center with my niece the other day. One boy managed to find this big red ball and jam it at the bottom of the slide. His little brother then proceeded to go down the slide and get stuck. Chaos ensued for a while as they tried to get the boy out. The parents were going on and on at the staff. Eventually, they swindled a free drink out of the place. Then they gave their daughter a lollipop, no food is allowed in the actual play area, and she ran around the play area and climbed the stairs to come down the slide. We were watching all of this whilst keeping an eye on my niece, basically getting her to stay out of the way. The parents made barely any effort to get the lolly off her. She then went into this little viewing thing made of perspex with the lolly in her mouth and was dribbling. Her drool then proceeded to drip down to where we were sitting. We promptly left after being completely grossed out. This is by far the nastiest family I've ever come across, and a very good argument for contraception. Yeah, some parents are a walking billboard for reasons to not have kids. In high school, I made friends with this really shy guy who stuttered and was generally socially awkward, but really nice. He was also a genius pianist. He was taking 2 years for one at his piano courses. He was composing amazing pieces at the age of 16, and I truly admired his ability. His parents, however, didn't see it that way. They were both engineers, and they considered his love for music despicable, worthless, and a bad habit that needs to be uprooted. When he was practicing at home, they tossed old shoes at him, and they made him sleep on the floor if he played for more than 2 hours. Once a professor from the musical academy called them to tell them that they have an amazing son and that he could be famous one day. They hung up the phone. When high school was over, he really wanted to apply to the musical academy, but they didn't let him. They said that the only courses they would ever fund were the ones in math and geography, the qualifying subjects for the economy university. So he had to go there for his higher education. I haven't seen him in a good while, but I heard he went abroad. I hope he escaped those jerks for good. It really sucks to see kids who have an amazing amount of talent and parents that just don't support them the way they need to. My mom is a teacher at a primary school in England in a really bad part of town. The stories she brings home are appalling, from kids who have never been read to or even talked to much who come to school age 5 without being able to speak in proper sentences. Also, the saddest things often involve parenting from the previous generation. The standout event being a mother who came into my mother, the music teacher, and SBS, that she doesn't know any nursery rhymes to sing to her children, which was one of the set tasks for bonding type homework. She spent an hour with that woman teaching her Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. I was at a mall playground with the wife and 2 kids. My son was 3 years old and was running around with about 20 other kids, most of them his age. Keep in mind that kids can't be taller than 3 feet to play in this little playground. There was this one fat woman and she was watching about 4 kids, and all of them were taller than 4 feet and they were playing rough, pushing each other around and whatnot. My son goes around the area that they were playing at and starts playing by himself, and one of the kids tries to kick my son. My wife, who's 5'2" and 100 pounds, calmly walks that way with my 3-month-old daughter and tells the woman, who's like 5'6" and about 250 pounds, to watch her kids because they were playing a little rough. She said, "Okay, whatever." My wife stays there and watches just in case something happens. The older kid goes running towards my son and pushes him. My wife tells the kid, who's about 9, not to push my son. The woman flips the heck out and starts screaming, "Don't scream at my baby," and blah blah blah. My wife tells her that she should pay more attention to her kids and how they're too old to be playing around smaller kids. She tells my wife to shut up and not to tell her how to raise her kids. My wife starts walking away and the woman starts getting louder. So from my seat 15 feet away, I yell at her, "You do not talk to my wife that way. Your kids are misbehaving and you're doing nothing about it. Learn how to be a good parent." She shuts up and looked at me in disbelief. She didn't know I was with my wife, or that I would talk to her like that in front of so many people. She then started to talk crap again, and we ignored her. After 5 minutes of her ridiculousness, my wife got the security guard and she got her butt kicked out of the place. 15 minutes after, she passes doing threatening signs at my wife, but when I looked at her, she stopped and looked away. I was seriously raging and about to beat her, but I did my best to calm down and be a responsible adult. I totally get it, my friend. Interactions like that get your blood boiling, especially if someone's gonna go threatening me and mine. If you don't wear these pink shoes I'm buying you, I'm gonna cut all your rabbits' heads off. Sadly, that was actually my dad talking to a 10-year-old me in a thrift store. He then proceeded to get into an argument with a woman who said, "You're the most horrible person I've ever heard in my life," and called her a man-hater and a lesbian before we finally left. Compared to some of the other stuff, that's relatively mild. Yeah, my childhood sucked. I was at a movie theater and we had just walked in and sat down in our seats since the theater we were going to was open. An employee, probably around 35 years old, walks in and asks everyone, a small handful of people, to leave for just a few minutes so we can clean it. He had a stutter and some type of mild disability. The employee was super friendly and nice about having to ask us all to leave. This dad with a beer belly and cut off sleeves who was there with his 3 preteen and teen kids started making fun of the employee and the way he spoke, joking, mimicking, and trying to get his kids to join in with him. I chewed that jerk out. How are you gonna set an example like that for your kids? This guy's being super friendly, working hard, and you're gonna give him a hard time because of the way he speaks, which he can't control, by the way. Some people really shouldn't breed. I worked as a waitress for about 4 years. One family was very rude and demanding every time they ate there. Their children, ranging from 5 to 10 years old, would snap at me or shake their cups to get my attention. When we didn't come right away, the children would literally start screaming, while the parents laughed. Another family had a 12-year-old daughter that would take all the sugar packets from the table and play with them. Much of the sugar ended up on the floor or on the table. Once I figured out what she was doing, I would go take away the basket before they sat down. Lastly, I only saw this family in there once, but it was a tatted up gangster couple. The mom was no older than 23, and they had 4 kids. Let them run around the restaurant untamed and basically ignored them the entire time. They made a mess of the tables and didn't even tip. Oh, and they also tried stealing quarters off this cancer research donation thing we had. I work customer service at Loblaws part-time while I go to school. Lucky me. I've grown resentful of people. One day, I encountered a lady who was absolutely flabbergasted that her milk, on which the expiry date was clearly written, had gone bad. She was going on and on complaining. Had the store manager called down, the front end manager, and the dairy manager too. Once this whole ordeal was handled, she turns to her 14-year-old daughter and says, "Now that's how it's done." As someone who worked in customer service and retail for a good portion of their life, I hate people like this. Don't be teaching your kids to be the same jerk you are. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think it should be mandatory that every person is to work at least 2 years in customer service, just to learn to be a little humble.
People with religious extremist parents. What was it like growing up? Had an exorcism in the living room once, also didn't get all of my vaccines, and now I don't know what I'm at risk for since those tests to see what vaccines you've had are so expensive. Oh, making friends was awkward in grade school because I couldn't watch the shows and listen to the music they did. Some of my earliest memories are driving with my whole family in the Suburban and my dad telling us all the great Christian persecution was going to begin soon, and we all needed to be prepared for them to take us away from him and my mom and how terrible it would be. He got very into Y2K prepping as well, and I remember calling my friends and telling them to believe in Jesus because the world was going to end and we needed to all be ready. I also remembered being confused as to why I didn't have any good friends. Middle school was pretty rough for me. I moved 1,000 kilometers to get away from them. It was terrible. I remember getting into an argument when I was 15 with my parents about how crappy my life was. I had no time for friends because I'd wake up, go to school, come home, do dishes, then homework, then chop wood for 2 hours, clean the floors, maintain the fire in the wood stove, etc. It was like minus 30 degrees Celsius, and I'd have to basically take care of my parents, make them coffees and teas, make them food, keep the fire warm for them. It was the only means of heating that we had. Neither one worked. They just sat there for 16 hours a day on their computers, smoking 5 packs a day between them, staining the entire inside of the house yellowish brown. I used to get bullied in school for smelling like smoke. Anyways, they were bragging about their conservative parenting skills, being superior, etc. I just said something to my dad along the lines of, "Get off your high horse." One of the few times I ever talked back. He just shoved me as hard as he could and stormed out yelling and swearing. Used to get beat and yelled at all the time, so that was nothing, to be honest. It was awful. I burnt my hands and arms occasionally in the wood stove stoking the fire, and my mom used to say things like, "If you think that's painful, just imagine the torture that's ahead of you if you don't respect your parents." She literally said this to me too: "God will make it so that I'll forget that you ever existed when you go to hell and I go to heaven because God takes good care of mothers." I am not exaggerating. This actually happened. Pretty sure I've said this before, at least in so many words, and I'll say it again. Fanaticism in anything is only going to lead you down a dark and horrible path that will surely lead to people absolutely hating you. And if they don't, it's probably because they're just as indoctrinated as you. I'd hear my mom constantly complaining about how I am not religious and a shame to the family. Occasionally, there was even a comment about how me not being religious is the reason of my parents' health being bad. When I was young, my mom was cautious with who I was friends with. People practicing other religions were a strict no-no. I have a friend since college, and my mom constantly worries that I'm going to convert. I was always under my parents' watch. They were helicopter parents, so that I couldn't do anything against our religion. I was always the weird kid because my clothing had to be appropriate, and anyone that wasn't our religion, I had to try to convince them to come to our church, or what was the point of being friends with them. Women weren't equal, and we were told that everything we were doing was practicing to be a good wife and mother someday, and that it was our true calling and nothing else mattered. If we planned to go to college, that was great because it could help us teach our children. Sundays were for church only, or church-related activities. No TV, no playing outside, etc. We were just normal enough that we thought we were normal until we grew up and realized that we didn't have any self-esteem or value in ourselves without the church giving us our worth and value. I'm still trying to detox and to find ways to raise my kids because I know I don't want to raise them like I was, but I also don't know the right way to raise them any other way, and I fall into the pattern of being like my parents. Not my parents so much as my grandparents, but my parents carried on the traditions for most of my life. No shows or movies with talking animals, encourages friendships with demons. Women wear ankle-length skirts and dresses, don't cut their hair, keep their hair in a tight, modest bun for church, or any time they wear it up. Purity promises and rings at the start of puberty. Women do not work outside of the home unless absolutely necessary. When my brother got outed as gay, my grandmother nearly tried to exorcise the devil out of him. Church was cult-like, youth groups was a brainwashing session. I've been made to read the Bible multiple times over as my homework instead of real schooling. I'm an atheist now, undoubtedly because of how religion was forced down my throat past my tears growing up. I've had to learn not to hate every religion or religious person I come across. My years at church broke my sense of self-worth and my moral compass until very recently. For me, it was only my mom who was religious, Jehovah's Witness. She converted a few years after my parents had me, so my dad had no idea how bad it was going to be. No holidays or friends for me growing up. I remember freshman year of high school. I wanted to hang out with some kids after school. My mom was not having it and drove around town to find me. It was humiliating, and she openly disapproved them because of how they dressed. She didn't want me hanging out with the wrong crowd because it would stray me further from God. After that, I just stopped bothering trying to make friends last outside of school. My childhood memories were mainly hearing my parents arguing and threatening divorce because my dad was unhappy and hated that our family couldn't do most things like birthdays, Christmas, Halloween, etc. I'm pretty sure their love life was depressing too because lovemaking was only to procreate and it had to be missionary. She openly hates homosexuals and is very judgmental. She has exploded on me and given me silent treatments due to my choice of hair color and fashion. My dad also lost a lot of friends just like me. I'm 26 now and they're still together, but I know they're struggling like they did when I was 5. When I was a kid, my best friend in the entire world actually was a Jehovah's Witness, and I didn't really understand it by any means, but they weren't that bad or anything. Like, you know, they were pretty normal. They just went to church and stuff and didn't do Christmas and stuff like that. I remember their family being a little dysfunctional, but so was mine, and that didn't really matter to me because, like I said, we were just best friends. Grew up hardcore Mormon. I'd like to stress that my childhood isn't as common for other Mormon kids. Most of the time, Mormons are fairly understanding and loving to their kids, but the Mormon culture does promote the mentality my parents had. When I was growing up, I wasn't punished like some others here. I was spanked and experienced the belt, but that isn't why I have some psychological problems now. The real punishment was shame. From the earliest age I can remember, around 6, I was told that I was lazy and wasting my life away. When I first heard the word SX around 11, I looked it up on the family computer. I was a pervert from then on, and had to talk to the bishop every month for a checkup. Hell, in every school I went to, my parents told school counselors that I wasn't allowed on computers because I might look up pictures of naked women. I never did this. This is just the SparkNotes version, but I internalized the shame. Being so young, I just accepted that I was what my father called me and hated myself for it. I was a lazy failure at 6. I was a pervert at 11. It didn't stop me from doing any of the things I was doing before. I just learned to fear my father's footsteps as if it was the devil himself walking down the hallway. I lived my
life in the brief intervals between punishments. I am still not beyond this at 24 years old. I later found out that the reason my father lashed out at me and called me these names was because he was fighting his own battles on these issues. He watched smut and hated himself for it. He lost his job. Not his fault. 2008 was hard for everyone. 2020 is no better. And felt inadequate. He was directing his own self-hatred at me. Now, both of us hate ourselves, and digging our way out seems impossible. From my mother's side, things were smooth. However, my father was using religion to abuse me. As a Muslim, we used to memorize the Quran. For me, I wasn't good at memorizing, so I spent 12 years, 3 hours a day trying. After all, I stopped trying and he kept shaming me for not completing it. During the 12 years, he was always comparing me with other kids, friends and cousins, which made me hate them as well. He would also use religion to abuse my mother, face covers and gloves and other crap. Not only that, he listens to music whenever he wants, but when he sees us listening to it, he starts yelling and shaming us. Extremists consider music as taboo. Life was hard for me when I'm close to him, so I moved away. I wouldn't call them extremists, but Pokemon, Harry Potter, MTG, and a lot of other stuff was banned. Pokemon because it promoted evolution over creationism, other stuff because of magic and demonic imagery, the list goes on. I missed out on a lot of cool stuff growing up. Then both my uncles came out as gay, and the whole religious bullcrap stopped soon after. Parents and I get along fine now, but I'm still kind of salty about some stuff. They confiscated my entire secret stash of MTG cards when they found them. I'm super atheist now, by the way. How insecure do you have to be with your ideology and just way of life if you feel like, I don't know, Pikachu could flush years of indoctrination down the toilet because your child plays Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh or some crap? It's just so stupid. Same for religions that ban music. It's just pathetic at a certain point. My parents are still Muslim and I am still not an adult, so I am still in the process of having to live with them. You would guess that my father would be a little more open to the world after seeing his half-brother being happily married to a man. No, exactly the opposite. You are not allowed to be like him. He is going to the bad place. He is tainting the family's reputation. That is point one, forcing their child to be someone that they simply aren't. They want to force me and my brother to go back to Turkey. I do not want that at all. I was born and raised and I have lived in Germany for my whole life. Turkey is also really anti-LGBTQ+, something that would really endanger me. Having parents that think that mental illness in general do not exist and are results of demons entering the body to torment your soul is not a great thing. I am pretty sure that I have anxiety, depression, and maybe something more that I am not comfortable with sharing, but guess what? There is no such thing as anxiety or depression. You simply do not wish to follow my guidance. And they send me to the mosque to learn and read our Quran and to chase the demons away. I need a therapist since I was maybe 6 years old, but nobody listens. I am feeling like they are trying to take my identity away. I am someone who isn't comfortable with their body at all. I don't mean weight, I mean the gender they assign me at birth. But I know that I will never get the chance to live as who I am. Even my friends do not accept my wishes and still use the wrong pronouns and name. Guess I'll never get the chance to choose who I want to be and who I want to love. Like seriously, they picked who they want to marry themselves, but when I asked if I can choose my husband, I get a no? I am someone who would gladly cut them out from my life, but sadly I know what would happen. They would try more things to get me to stay, or would never leave me alone. My family thought my dad was murdered in Ecuador on a mission trip and that it was my fault. He was on a mission trip and would call us daily from the phone in town about a mile walk from where he stayed. We didn't get a call for 2 days and then got a voicemail from a hospital in Ecuador that was in Spanish and had bad reception. Around this time, I snuck a copy of Diablo home from a friend's house to install on my computer against my mother's commands. She was very religious and warned me about the evils of bringing sinful things into our home. Always said that doing so would invite devils into our home and our lives. Long story short, I lived in complete agony and regret for a week thinking I murdered my father, just to get a call from him when he landed in Texas saying they lost power to phones in town and he wasn't able to call home. This is just one of the many times I was messed up over our religious upbringing. My parents were pretty cool when it came to religion and raising me and my sister growing up. They were both Christians and I was taught all the stories and such, but we weren't churchgoers. It was exposure to my aunt and uncle and their family that really gave me a taste of religious fundamentalism. I moved from
a heavily Catholic, though my immediate family weren't Catholic, small Texas town to Middle Tennessee where I turned 10. Not only did I really get my first taste of religious fundamentalism moving into the Bible Belt, but particularly the hardcore Baptist sect of it, the largest being the aforementioned aunt and uncle. Our families got along, but they would always pressure us into going to church with them, make buttholish comments about our parents raising us for hell and that we turn out to be bums and women of the night. Over the course of 13 years of living in Tennessee, I moved back to Texas a decade ago. Our families had more than one falling out. I'm grateful that I didn't live directly under the thumb of it, but between them and the overabundance of fundamentalism in rural Tennessee really turned me off religion entirely, and is a large reason of why I am so proud to be an atheist today. So congratulations to said aunt and uncle, you failed spectacularly. I was raised Mormon and I happen to also be gay. My father is nothing short of devout, very religious. I ended up feeling alone most of my teenage years, and at the time thought I would disappoint my parents so strongly I thought I would never survive the stress. So there's a lot of pressure to feel the spirit even at a young age. But there's a lot more age-based ceremonies, so you get a lot of attention specifically on yourself at a young age. 8. Baptism. My parents also gave me Mumi, First Bible/Book of Mormon. 12. Become a deacon, passing sacrament. 14. Become a teacher, preparing sacrament. 16. Becoming a priest, blessing sacrament. 18. Gaining the priesthood, the right to most of the authority and capabilities in the church. 19. Going on a mission. Anyway, I never felt anything, and once I started having gay urges, I freaked and repressed those emotions deep down. By the time I was 16, my faith was faltering, as so many of the teachings made no sense to me. I stopped going to the church, never got the priesthood, never went on mission, and my parents kept saying, it's just a phase. At 25, after another failed female relationship, she was incredible, I just had zero attraction to her. I finally came to terms with being gay. I had no idea how I would ever find the courage to tell them. I was so afraid they would shut me out and I would lose them forever, especially my dad. Despite his strong religious background, he was always a very loving father. I love his company. When I was 27, I told my parents I actually had a boyfriend for a year and it was going well. My mom basically started becoming hysterical. My father, stone silent. My mom spouting facts about HIV. My dad's look of confusion and controlled poise was unnerving. It was a bumpy next couple of years for both of them, but my mom came around sooner. My dad took forever. I reminded myself it took me 13 years since puberty to accept this. I can give them time too. He started coming around since I got in a new relationship with my partner. My current partner of 4 years is incredible. He melts the stone hearts of both my parents. He's kind, anticipates the needs of everyone around him, and a joy to be around. My parents see how happy he makes me. My mom asked me recently, when are we getting married? My father hugs my partner with genuine love and appreciation. Being raised religious was very stressful. I felt alone for a long period in my life. Now I am living what I thought was not achievable. I opened up to my parents. They accept me for who I am. I accept them, and we're all happier than I ever could have hoped for. Sometimes you really need a story like this one just to lighten the mood a little bit, because I'm actually really happy for this dude. Was deathly terrified of who I was. I'm bi. My dad literally told me he would disown us if he found out we were gay. The funny thing is, we ended up disowning him. He was doing illegal substances behind our backs, and now he can't see his grandkids. Grew up with heavily religious parents, but my mom was way more immersed within it than the rest of my family. Christian. She wasn't as strict with me compared to my other siblings, but she basically forced the idea of church on all of us, and kinda drilled into our head that participating in worldly events will send you to hell. Sex before marriage? Hell. LGBTQ+ friends? Hell. Self-deletion? Hell. You get the gist of it. I felt guilty for feeling and thinking a lot of things I considered to be bad and would try to make up for it by praying. She was also the primary source for my horrid self-image issues. I was pretty overweight as a kid, and my mom has always been overweight, so hearing things like, you don't need to be eating that extra cookie, or you're way too big, or I definitely need to get you a trainer so you can be skinny like your friends, definitely crushed me on the inside. I I did end up losing a lot of weight and evened out, so she never really comments on my body anymore. The whole deliverance plus tongues thing was scary to me as a child, and I never fully understood it. I tried so hard to feel the presence of God within me, but I never understood what everyone else was talking about. I never talked to God, and eventually I started questioning things when I was around 12 to 13. Anyways, fast forward to when I was around 15, I had realized how crappy organized religion was, and how inauthentic and hypocritical everyone is. I told my mom that I don't believe in God, and she pulled the, "But God provided everything for you, the house we live in, the cars we drive, etc., etc." Like, no, I'm pretty sure you working your butt off day in and day out did that. A lot of times she also likes to go on the whole, if you don't follow in God's path, you'll just be a vehement sinner who will go to hell spiel. It's tiring and repetitive. She's still a Jesus freak, and I still don't agree with the church whatsoever, but most of the time I just go so she won't moan at me or threaten to take my car keys away, or some absurd thing like that. Nowadays, though, I have no interest in being part of the church or religion whatsoever, but every Sunday morning we go, I always have a toke session beforehand, LOL. I remember crying myself to sleep some nights because my friends celebrated Christmas, so I thought that meant they couldn't get into heaven. That is like really, really sad. Like the thought of every year that comes around, everyone's like excited for Christmas, and then this one kid is just like so upset that his friends aren't going to go to heaven with him. That's really sad. I lack sentiment in any form, and I'm almost entirely incapable of love. If somebody hurts me, I automatically sever our relationship in my head, and it's like I never knew them. I grew up incredibly vulnerable to conspiracy theories because facts didn't matter. I grew up with no sense of empathy because the church told me what and how to feel about all things. I grew up with no self-confidence because I was expected to be perfect and could not be. I grew up with extreme self-loathing because if I wasn't happy, it's because I wasn't close enough to God. Depression was my own fault because I wasn't close enough to God. Illness was my own fault because I wasn't close enough to God. If I have financial pain, it's because I'm not close enough to God. Now that I'm almost 30, I've left that cesspool of lies and I'm learning how to be a human who feels empathy, sees facts, and is capable of love. It's frickin' hard. I'm gonna try and find one that isn't so sad. 1. Very religious parents. We have to abstain from eating onions, meat, and garlic for 9 days, twice a year. 2. My parents always think that their religion is the best. They sometimes criticize other religions. 3. They think homosexuality is a sin. 4. My mother wants me to stop eating non-vegetarian food after I get married. 5. I'm only allowed to eat non-vegetarian on Sunday, Friday, and Saturday. 6. My mother frowns when I tell her that I don't believe in God. Yes, I'm Hindu. Yes, it doesn't sound so extreme, but I want to be a chef, so it does sound extreme from my point of view. No, I'm not going to get the hell out of this place because I still love my parents. My mother and father work very hard to ensure I get a proper education and food. Okay, maybe a little oppressive in some regards, but not that bad, not that bad. I honestly think that's the best tone we're gonna end on.
Teenage Redditors, what's the worst part of being a teenager these days? The pressure of being expected to go to a good college as you anxiously hear about student debt getting higher and higher. You kind of think it would be cool, but you're scared out of your mind of the prospect of being in debt for so many years after you graduate. At the same time as everyone's assuring you that if you don't go to college, you're a loser idiot who will work at McDonald's forever. Also, the idiotic technology stigma from older generations. I was reading a book on a Kindle for English in my French class, and she not only took it away from me, but yelled at me for texting during class. I tried to tell her that the thing was literally a slightly more advanced book, but she refused to believe me. On the same note, how online friends are considered not real because they're totally computer programs and not people on the other side of the monitor. My parents always tease me about not having many friends. When I do ask to go over to someone's house or vice versa, they say no. They want me to make friends without being with friends. Also, very high expectations suck. High expectations comes from every parent across every generation, I can promise you that. Having everyone ask what you want to do with your life. I don't even know what I want for breakfast. Everything is taken 20 times more serious. I got a 10-day suspension for a freaking box cutter in my car for work. I'm a straight A student with perfect behavior. My dad points out in front of the whole school board that in the 70s he had a shotgun in his car for hunting while he was at school. Yeah, times have changed. I would think a box cutter is being a little overly cautious though. Being treated like a child and then expecting us to act like adults and take on adult responsibilities the moment we turn 18. Again, generally applies to every generation. College educations cost more and mean less. Getting a degree is basically expected of us, and the great jobs that you're promised aren't always there when you're done. Storekeepers looking at you like you're about to steal something. Yeah, I remember those days. I'm expected to transition from my youth to an adult instantly. I need to have my career planned out, my college picked, and a job on the side while I still suck at doing many things like tying my shoe. I suck at it, I don't know why. It's so much pressure and I don't feel I have the maturity needed yet, but I need to fake it to make it. I'm gonna give you a pro tip here, buddy. Everyone's faking it. Nobody knows what they're doing. There are no real adults as you know them as kids. We're all just winging it. Everyone expects you to do something great. I feel so pressured sometimes. I once had a teacher tell me, "Oh, that's not a grade I expect to see from you. You need to do your best." Even when I had honestly done my best. I just turned 20 and for a while I was really sad about it because I felt like I wasn't done being a teenager. This thread has confirmed for me that turning 20 really isn't that bad. It's just that most of my teenage life involved being too sick to really do much. A lot of time was also spent being ruled by depression and anxiety. The good parts of my teens were so good that it made me wonder how my teenage years could have gone if all the crappy stuff hadn't happened and I'd just been normal. But in the last week or so, I've definitely learned that being 20 is infinitely cooler than being 16, and that while my teenage circumstances weren't normal in the slightest, it is normal to have a crappy time being a teen. Parents. I have a tracker on my phone, and my parents flip and scream at me whenever I turn it off. Oh, and the sudden gravity of the world in my situation here. Yeah, I'm sure it's hard with parents having access to the technology that they do now. At the end of the day though, I will say 99% of parents are just trying to make sure that you're safe. School food is at an all-time low. To be fair, how would you know? We get put down by our elders for being wrong in some way because of the time frame in which we were born. So what if we don't have to walk 5 miles uphill every day to get to school? That doesn't mean I'm any less a contributing member of society than you are. To be fair, you're still in school, so not technically contributing to society yet, but I'm sure you'll do fine when you get there. How much stricter the laws become, and how easy it is to get into a lot of trouble. I hear all these stories from my dad and his friends, my uncles, friends' dads, and older cousins about all the things they did, and how sometimes they would get caught by the cops doing regular, stupid teenage stuff. Speeding, racing, drinking underage, paintballing in the streets, getting into fistfights, or getting caught with a little bit of pot. From what they told me, the cops seem a lot more relaxed, and let them off with warnings because they understood that teens do stupid things and try drugs and alcohol. I hear all of these situations and think if I ever did any of this and got caught, I would very likely get in a lot of trouble and possibly put in jail. It seems like no one remembers that the time to screw up and learn from stupid mistakes is when you're a teenager. As for high school, if I did half the things I hear they used to do in high school, I would be in jail. I will say, yes, cops handle things very differently nowadays, and I think a lot of that would come down to better training. They find a kid drinking underage and literally want to ruin their life. They seem to forget that they're here to help and protect society, not screw them over and make a quota. Way too much focus on grades rather than learning. This also causes way too much stress in school that is unhealthy and can create a terrible connection between the student and the joy of learning. Also, the college process. Screw the college process. I would argue now that learning is a lot more lenient and that there's a lot of different types of learning available to you now. Back in the day, if you didn't follow the specific curriculum that was assigned to you or you weren't able to keep up with it, too bad. Aspiring to be great or do something meaningful with your life, then realizing the system and society you were raised in will be the first thing to beat you and your ambitions down. Oh, this kid's already figured it out. Being expected to work for free to get experience, especially knowing not too long ago on-the-job training was paid and covered what college and internships do now. We've all seen the memes. Employers want 30 years of experience but no older than 20 and they're only going to pay you 3 cents above minimum wage. The fact that we don't believe in our own generation. The fact that the generation preceding us doesn't believe in us, even though they complained when the generation preceding them did the same. No matter how great we are, what great things we do, we're classified as a lazy generation that isn't as good as those before us. But if this question was asked 5, 15, or 50 years ago, the answer would be the same. It's a multi-generational, unavoidable, self-deprecating cycle of stereotypes that are in place to help legitimize the elder generation after they felt scorned when they were teens. And instead of fighting it as a group, we agree and blame each other. Okay, here's what I'll say on this one. If they're complaining that you have it easier than they did, that means that the previous generation did accomplish something, and you're gonna make life a little bit easier for the generation after. That's kinda how it goes. If you're gonna choose not to acknowledge that, okay, go live in a cave and rub some sticks together until you make fire. I'll leave you in the woods with a hand axe and we'll see how long it takes before you can send me a text. Parents tell me I'm not educated enough on social issues and I'm not making up my own mind. I get educated on social issues and make up my mind on those issues, but I don't share my parents' opinions on things. Suddenly, my perspective on these issues doesn't matter because I'm too young and I lack real-world experience. Give me a break. Sounds like your parents wanted you to make your own decisions and aren't happy that you didn't make the same ones they did. The worst part is honestly homework. I would rather go to school for longer and have less breaks if we don't get any homework, because it just ends up being longer work than if we just added 2 more hours of school, and tons of stress. Also, an issue with this is that teachers don't necessarily communicate how much homework they're giving to the kids, and thus can end up giving them a lot more than intended when all of them start piling up. For me, it's the stereotypes about us. Not all of us are pot-smoking, weed sock-wearing, sex-crazed, uneducated, and disrespectful jerks. We're considered a terrible generation, when really we're probably no more rebellious or terrible than our parents were at that age. I gotta agree with you on this one, but let me tell you again, everyone who was ever a teenager went through this. Other kids my age that think they're better than us because they listen to classic rock. This is always going to be a thing. People are going to tell you that their music's better than yours. Doesn't matter when it came from or who it is. Everyone has their opinions and they think they're cool because of it. For me, it's peer pressure. I'm sure it was the same years ago, but I recently moved from Massachusetts to California, and it was my first time ever being legitimately exposed to anything like weed or alcohol. I spend time with the people who are all about partying and hooking up and stuff, and I don't like that stuff, but I like the people. So my best friend comes up to me with questions like, "So have you hooked up with anyone yet?" And I'm like, "No." And he instantly goes around to every girl he knows I'm into or finds somewhat attractive and asks them to hook up with me. And I know he means well, but it just makes me feel really weird because I was brought up being told never to touch drugs or alcohol and not to date until college and stuff like that. Just me, of course. It could be different for others. Also, you're constantly pressured to excel at something, and I don't. I'm just not amazing at anything. I'm average in every way. Let me tell you, buddy, 99.999999% of people are average. Don't feel like that's a mark against you. Being written off as a teenager regardless of your mental capacity or maturity. By that logic, one could write off humanity as a whole. Participation awards are dumbing everyone down. My peers are too entitled. Everyone's treated like a perfect star when they're younger because parents think their kids can't handle not being perfect, when it's really just the parents who want to see their kids be the best. Everyone grows up thinking they're special, and then either won't accept that they aren't when they're older, or has a hard time coming to terms with it. We're taught that we're all winners, but that takes away the joy of actually accomplishing or being good at anything. The peer pressure is overwhelming. The pressure to lose your virginity, smoke, drink, and do drugs. I'm almost 19, and I'm the last virgin among my friends. They're not really pressuring me to lose my virginity, but it just sucks to feel left out of the loop. It sounds like most of this pressure is coming from yourself. Don't worry, everyone takes life at their own pace. Being written off as a hormonal teenager really sucks. Parents don't believe that I'm depressed. They think I've been in a bad mood for these past few years. I'm pretty sure that harmful thoughts alone would merit a trip to a therapist's office. Not to mention the daily struggle of getting out of bed, going to school, hiding my wrists, pretending to be normal. I'm a teenager, so I'm just lazy or moody. One of my friends recently announced she's pregnant. She's 14. People say our generation is childish. I disagree. Our generation is growing up too fast. It's terrifying. I've yet to have my first kiss, drive a car, drink alcohol, have a child. All of these things that are now being achieved by kids 3 years younger than me. It's just not right. Knowing how badly the generations before us screwed the environment up is a really scary thought. The type of stuff other teenagers are into. No, Greg, I don't want to get drunk at 10 a.m. For me, it's just the transition. I just want to get settled, out of college, secure job, marriage. I'm 19 and currently enrolled in my 3rd different college. Granted, not everyone chooses to transition that much, but it is frustrating. Being told that everything that is discussed in school is absolutely necessary later in life. Screw that. I'd like trade schools, where we learn what we need to learn, and not everything the human race has discovered since the beginning of our existence. I'll say at the age of 32, I've never had to solve for the area under a curve. That if I want to be part of the popular group at my school, I need to be rich, smoke a lot, and drink a lot. Pro tip, there's no such thing as a popular group unless you make one out to be. They're just a group of people who enjoy each other's company, like you enjoy your friends' company. They have similar interests like you and your friends do. They aren't special. Why look up to them? Mood swings. What's that? You're in a great mood? Well, I'm gonna kick your heart in the balls for no apparent reason. Have fun overanalyzing every tiny aspect of yourself. Again, this is something that might never go away. Your entire life is online friends and relationships. You're a nerd or loser or whatever at age 14. People can track that back at age 24. It's ridiculous and kind of sad. People spend way too much time worrying about making their social media personas so big that they lose sight of the relationships in front of them. You never really know someone. This is one thing I will say is social media was nowhere near as big a thing when I was in high school as it is now. I can only imagine the added crap that goes along with that. I'm a virgin by choice. Most of my other friends have had quite a bit of sex. I get crap because I want to wait to lose my virginity with someone I've been dating for at least a couple of years, because I want it to mean something. My friends had a competition over spring break to see who could screw the most girls in a week, and they don't understand why I don't want to be like them. Education is incredibly expensive, and yet we're lazy or whatever for not attending college. A lot of kids in my graduating class don't give a crap anymore because they know they can't afford the higher education they want. All a lot of us care about at this point is graduating. We aren't given many options. Personally, learning to be a man without my father being there to guide me and teach me how. He passed away when I was 13. Aside from that, it's the overall standards that I'm being held up to. I'm the youngest child in my family, and my brother and sister both graduated high school with honors and are off pursuing great things. Then there's me. I'm just different from them. A freshman in high school who lives with a mom that just doesn't get that I see things and do things differently. Their knowledge is in books, and mine is in the sheets of music. I hate feeling like that makes me useless. I know I'm not the only one who feels this way. The standards are what's hurting a lot of teens. The fact that teenagers exist as some sort of pseudo-protected class and are hardly expected to be able to wipe their own butts, let alone make intelligent life decisions. There's a systematic lack of responsibility held by teenagers in our society such that any driven, motivated individual is aberrant. For the entirety of human history, people past the age of 14 or 15 were treated as responsible adults, but nowadays, many are coddled well into their 20s. I think it leaves people unable to ultimately become responsible members of society, and it's managed to create a positive feedback loop. Society doesn't give teenagers responsibility, so they become irresponsible, making society view them as unable to hold responsibility, and to withdraw even more. The expectations placed upon the average teenager typically involves not getting wasted or high on school nights and avoiding trouble with the police. Good grades are nice too, but maybe you can't manage to do your homework because you're meant for better things. This, instead of a system that existed even until the early 20th century. Make your way in the world or get left behind. I don't advocate a return to this system, but I do believe that more responsibility needs to be placed on young adults in order to foster their development into effective members of society. This is true. If you want them to be able to take responsibility, you need to trust them with some. The fact that it takes a bachelor's degree to babysit ticks me off. I'm trying to find a summer job and I can't get anything because I have no experience. But how do I get experience if I can't start anywhere? The fact that I'm 19 and get put in a group with 14 and 15-year-olds. Also, my senior year of high school, I had to ask to go to the bathroom. Now in college, no one gives a crap, and I'm solely responsible for myself. How does high school prepare me for college again? School is basically pointless, and going to college doesn't guarantee you the ultimate high-paying 9-to-5 anymore. Just because I know people will be like, your education is important, school is very good. Shut up. Learning is what's important, and that doesn't go on a whole lot in school anymore. And I know this gets said a lot by kids that slack in school to excuse themselves for being lazy and stupid, but I'm an AB student and I agree that a grade doesn't define anyone's intelligence. Yet, grades are all that's supposed to matter to kids these days. It's really pretty stupid, especially considering how little most college degrees do for us nowadays. The people suck. My bio teacher would put my classmates and myself down every day. People would report her all the time, and nothing happened. Finally, one day, I was like, I'm done. I'm making it stop. I recorded her on my phone, which is apparently called unlawful wiretap, yet I was in a public setting. Anyway, I caught so much stuff that she even downright refused to teach us anymore. Yeah, some kids in the class didn't always pay attention, but what she did was way overboard. She got suspended until we left her class. She took me to court. Since I didn't have a malicious intent, I get to go on a lovely program called diversion. I have to basically be on probation until November, and I have to do 30 hours of community service. All because I recorded my teacher to show the administration. I've never been in any sort of trouble. The school cop even got a good word out about me. I actually tried to be decent to this teacher, even though I hated her, and now she's talking crap about me. So much so that someone from my mom's job said that she called us degenerates. Just childish. And she's supposed to be the adult. One day, I got a large door jammed between my toes and punched a kid in the face, and he let it go. In that situation, I was definitely in the wrong and got nothing. The one where I feel I did the right thing, I got punished. I just hate people. This is just unfortunate to hear, honestly. It's the administration that should be doing something about the teacher that's causing problems. And you shouldn't get in trouble for doing what was necessary to prove to them that this was going on when they weren't doing their jobs properly to begin with. I hate the stereotyping of teenagers. People think all teenagers are obsessed with is swag and Instagram. Me and a lot of other teenagers are not like that. I also don't like when adults think my points are invalid because I'm 14. There are absolutely 14-year-olds with more common sense than people in their 30s, and sometimes you need to acknowledge that. The amount of general expectations of you, at least in the US, everyone who wants to succeed has to play 3 sports, play a musical instrument, get a 4.0 GPA, do way too many hours of community service, and still get 10 hours of sleep a night. I call bull on that. How being smart is frowned upon by other teenagers. Seriously, how often do you see reading or actually being intelligent as something a cool person does? No, they're always smoking and partying and drinking at age 15, and stupid things like that. In a few years, you're gonna come to learn that the word cool doesn't mean what you think it means. Reddit, what are some college majors that should definitely be avoided? If you're a journalism major, getting involved in student publications and media is way more important than classes. Journalists aren't hired based off their degree, but how well acclimated they are to newsrooms, deadlines, and things like that. You can't learn the trade in a classroom, only in the field. Classes are just to help you refine your skills and the little things. Standalone language majors. How are you, a student learning a language in less than 4 years, going to compete with a bilingual speaker who also has skills for the workforce? You have to pair it with something else. If you want to major in a language, you double major. I was looking for this one. I cannot tell you how many people major in a language without studying abroad and think they're going to be able to move to that country and work there. I did German and linguistics, double major, and am doing my master's in Germany with the intention of teaching English as a second language. Some of my friends just majored in French or German and planned on moving over here and getting any kind of job. This isn't something I've ever thought about, but makes a lot of sense when you lay it out like that. General studies. Just pick a major. Being undecided all 4 years won't look great on your first resume unless you leave undergrad with some amazing experience that translates into an immediate position. I was a history major. 'Twas fun, but no money. Now I'm a zookeeping major. Tons more fun and even less money. If you don't plan on getting at least a master's degree, avoid psychology. I've known several servers, bartenders, and receptionists that have their degree in psychology, even a few that have ended up in retail. Not that I look down on those jobs, just that they clearly don't require a psychology degree. To get a job in the field, you pretty much need to have a master's at least. Art history. My current roommate, out of college now, was an art history major. She doesn't do any art herself, she just really likes art. Spends a lot of her weekends going to museums and galleries. She can't find a job in what she wants to do. Has an entry-level position as an office administrator, and she hates it. She can't really move up much in her company because she doesn't have the knowledge of the industry she's in. She went to a private university for it, and will be paying off loans for a long time. This is one that before even coming to this thread, I heard was a rough one to try and get a job with. Be careful when studying music. Most universities offer music performance and music education. Getting a bachelor's in music education means you're certified to teach at a school, and therefore has a lot more potential of getting you a job. Music performance just means you got really good at playing your instrument. You'll still have job options such as giving lessons, starting your own studio, joining a professional symphony, or just being a freelance musician. But those all have varying levels of difficulty and instability. For example, to get into a symphony, you have to be the best of the best, at least for top-tier symphonies. So your probability of being hired depends solely on your audition. And to be a freelance musician means that there may be periods where you're unemployed. And even when you are hired by someone, you'll go most of the time without insurance or a retirement fund. And then you have to factor in the location you're in. If you're in an area that's musically dry, you won't be finding any paying gigs unless you're a teacher. There may be plenty of people wanting your services like churches, community bands, and musical pit orchestras, but you probably won't get paid. Yeah, unfortunately, artists and musicians have it rough nowadays, especially based on your area. Non-accredited majors. Even if it sounds like a good degree, mechanical engineering for example, it might not be accredited, meaning it doesn't hold anywhere near the value. I'm only using mechanical engineering as an example. This is normally an issue with university programs that are new, which means that their program normally wouldn't have accreditation. It would be in the application process. It's quite the gamble when you're a new student, because if they don't get accreditation by the time you graduate, you're SOL. Yeah, that would be the last thing you want, is to waste a whole bunch of money on a class that literally means nothing to anyone. Biology. Unless you want to go to med/farm/vet school or graduate school. A BS in biology won't get you very far, and you'll max out in earning potential early on. A lot of bio majors go back for their MS or PhD because they're stuck at low pay scale. If you already know that's what you want to do, you're fine. Make sure you do a BS and not a BA though. Don't do something you dislike because you think it's a good career path. Work is going to be a major part of your life, so aiming for something you can't stand doing is a bad idea. I'm fighting with that sort of. I decided to major in something I love, but I hate it now because it's becoming a career instead of a hobby. The career I want is generally lower pay, but I'd rather major in that because I'd actually be happy. This is the conflict I think a lot of college students go through. There's the thing that you want to do, but you kind of don't want to do it as a job because then you won't want to do it anymore. Versus the thing that you don't want to do, but it pays really well. I don't know. It's a tough decision to make either way. My last job was at a gas station chain, and I met at least 3 hourly gas station managers who had biology master's degrees. Blew my mind that they were attempting to pay down $120,000 worth of loans on $20 an hour. Everyone I know with a bio or biochem master's is employed in research or by private firms. What the heck were your coworkers doing? Criminal justice. It seems to be the new default major for people who don't actually know what they want to do now that psychology is out of vogue. I work at a courthouse and I never graduated college. Most of the new people are trying to get in with criminal justice degrees because it'll look good on their resume, and there are a ton of people applying with that major. Very competitive. Criminal justice sounds like something that would be useful if you're going for something in the law field, but maybe not? I don't know. It's not always just about the major, but what else you do in school. I got my degree in anthropology, which as a bachelor's doesn't mean much in itself. But I managed to get into courses where I did actual research and got my name co-published in a couple professional journals. That was something I've been able to market to employers as much, if not more, than the degree. Same thing goes for something often badmouthed, like women's studies. I have two close friends who went that route and are both employed in careers. Women's studies, not STEM, prepared them to go on to get social work degrees, which is where they now make their living. Agreed. An in-demand major helps, but doesn't mean jack if you don't put in the work to network and intern. A crappy degree held by someone who did internships for at least the latter half of their education will be looked at better than a good degree holder with no experience. So, incoming college goers, intern, network, schmooze. Yeah, I think more and more places are going routes like this. Your college degree doesn't exactly mean a whole lot. Everyone wants experience. Or if you've managed to get an internship somewhere, then you've already gotten your foot in the door. Problem with internships is a lot of the time you're working for free for a while without a guaranteed job at the end of it. Unless you eat, sleep, and breathe architecture, do not even consider it as a major. You'll spend more money, more sleepless nights, and more of your sanity than any other student. Unless you have the passion necessary to make those sacrifices, forget it. Learn from my mistakes. I just finished a dual master's in architecture and urban design. Everything you said 100%, except now that I'm out and working, there was indeed light at the end of the tunnel. I feel bad talking crap about my own degree, but biomedical engineering. Maybe not avoid it, but make sure you have an idea of what you like at the beginning or early as possible, and tailor your work experience, classes, and training to that speciality. For example, if you like prosthetics, have things that show you're ready to compete with mechanical and electrical engineers over the same position, and that your biology and anatomy knowledge gives you an edge over them. All other engineers have obvious fields they can go into. Biomed is simply just not as flushed out, and employees may just pick grads with majors they fully understand. In my undergrad, I went more of the bioinformatics route and did a lot of coding, so I load up my resume with that stuff, and had 2 internships that furthered my coding ability. But would it have been easier if I just did computer engineering? Possibly. Avoid any major starting with pre-law, pre-med, anything like that. I know several people who became doctors with degrees in chemistry, biology, or engineering. I also know someone who finished pre-med, went to med school, realized he didn't want to be a doctor, and was screwed. He ended up spending 4 years getting a second bachelor's degree. Likewise, you can easily get a law degree and become a lawyer with degrees in all sorts of things. You can't do anything else with a pre-law degree. Criminal justice. I'm about 2 months away from having my AA in criminal justice, but every law enforcement professional I met said don't waste your time getting your bachelor's in criminal justice. Get it in something practical like business or engineering. So if God forbid something happens to you, then you have a degree in something else to fall back on. I want to be a police officer, by the way. That's the second time this one's come up. Maybe that is one to avoid. Don't do a business major if even the smallest amount of math freaks you out. Even in things that aren't accounting or finance, you'll still have to do a little bit in most entry-level positions. I feel like that one's kind of a given. If you're going to be in business, you're going to be handling numbers. Graphic design. The market is oversaturated with designers. Design is very subjective. No matter what jargon pro designers may throw at you about color theory and the golden ratio, when it comes down to you finding a job, it's all about if the employer likes what they see. The current industry is being devalued by sites like Fiverr and 99 Designs, where companies will pay pennies to get a logo or a flyer made. This makes companies not value or need in-house designers. Design agencies are very stuck up, and the culture is almost always cutthroat. The pay sucks. Depending on your city, the entry-level pay can fluctuate, but you'll be making nowhere near the money you could with other forms of education. You most likely will not be doing what you love unless you get lucky. If you become an in-house designer, be prepared to only design stuff related to whatever your company specializes in for the rest of your employment there. If you're hired at an agency, you'll have more opportunities to work on different brands, but may not be the brands you're interested in. If you don't like a crap ton of physics, or if you're not at least somewhat into it, don't go into lucrative engineering fields, because there's a very high chance you'll switch out. If you're in it only for the money, there's a big wake-up call heading for you. Again, engineering, you're going to be doing a lot of math, gotta be prepared for that. First of all, almost every major is useless if you can't show employers what you learned with it, i.e. internships, publications, research, papers and projects beyond what is expected of a college assignment, and things like that. Also, you may have the risk of making your degree useless if you want to stay in a certain area. In doing so, you're limiting your job prospects in that industry. For example, you major in art history, but there's only one art museum in the state and you don't want to leave the state. Secondly, most majors themselves have some degree of usefulness. Supposedly useless majors such as philosophy, history, and psych can be great prep for an advanced grad school degree like pre-law or other intensive writing and research degrees. Others, like English, classics, and journalism, show that you can write well, which is always valuable and can lead to jobs in copywriting, editing, and things like that. That being said, there are some degrees I would not recommend getting. Sports management for one. Coming from someone that worked at the highest levels of athletics, a sports management degree is useless. While there are jobs in sports, they just require you to grind and they're really competitive to get. I know for a fact that hiring managers don't give a crap about what degree you have, except for maybe like athletic training. They just care about your experience. So sports management itself doesn't get you hired, and it eliminates career options if a career in sports doesn't work out. It's also getting a rep that it's an easy major, in which I agree is the case with about 98% of sports management programs. Again, going to what I said earlier using the art history example, probably isn't a great idea to major in sports management if you attend a small private NAIA school in the middle of Iowa. Other useless majors include dance or ballet if you have a bad knee or back, and African American studies from North Carolina. Google UNC academic scandal. Sometimes you do need to use a little bit of common sense. I've seen a lot of people saying foreign language unless you double major. Nobody has yet mentioned that Japanese isn't a happy life, period. There's literally thousands of other Westerners pining for that English teaching job in Japan, and they treat you like dirt when you get there. I'm sure I could name like half a dozen people off the top of my head that would love a job like that. In the UK, if you can afford not to, don't do law. Many law firms I stumbled across prefer non-law rigorous degrees, linguistics, maths, and hard science, and a conversion to law afterwards. If you get good enough grades, you might be able to get your degrees for free because some firm or inn of court will pay for it. If you want to do IP law, just do science. Whatever area of science you graduate from is the area that you can do patents. Also, you can work in the patents office. If you don't want to do law, you'll always get asked the question as to why you studied law and you're not working in law, as I got when I was trying to get a job in PR. Finally, if you want to be a solicitor, forget the LPC. A new super exam came out in 2020, and you won't need to spend 10 to 20k on the LPC to qualify. You will, however, need 2 years work experience, so get that now. Again, another example, everyone just wants you to have experience. They feel you learn more from actually doing the job than from learning about the job. Don't go to college, period, unless you know what you want to do. We've been looking at this all wrong. Start with where you want to be in 10 to 15 years, and then work backwards. What's between you and that place? If college is one of those things, then go to college. Looking at it the wrong way is how we've ended up with $1 trillion in student loan debt. Don't just go to college for the sake of going to college. It would literally be cheaper to travel around the world, and you'd learn more. This is something I completely agree with. This is something I've said before too. Figure out where you want to be and work backwards from there. Then start towards your goal. Graphic design. Honestly, a decent major. Just make sure you take it somewhere you'll have passionate professors and not ones that just link you to a YouTube tutorial. It's easy to teach yourself graphic design rather than dish out like $40,000 to learn it. As someone who's currently enrolled, I definitely agree. Although there is some expectations for students to solve design problems on their own, I think. Professors can only give you the building blocks, not the answer. Second time graphic design came up, and that does sound like a really cool one to work in. Sounds like the way to go is maybe learn yourself online and just start making a portfolio. Anthropology. Last I heard, they crank out about 3,000 master's degrees a year, while there are about 300 job openings per year in the field. Most people, I would say, don't do anthropology to be an anthropologist. A relative got an anthropology degree at 45 and used it to go into financial counseling. There are no bad majors, only bad planning. Your degree doesn't matter in getting a job as much as the grades you get and the work experience you get during the summer. Of course, if you want to do an actual profession, and I mean a profession like medicine, law, or engineering, you do need the requisite degree and good grades and good work experience. Save again for the caveat above, no one really expects you to do anything with what you learned at bachelor's level. What the degree is supposed to do is advertise your abilities and skills. Whether we like it or not, employers will look at academic ability as a key indicator of how trainable and employable you are. Many people downplay the value of good internships and work experience. Yes, a lot of terrible places don't pay at all, but unfortunately, the market is that you need to have experience. You can ask, how could a history major work at an iBank? It's not what you learn from a book, but the skills, analytical, critical thinking, and things like that. It also shows good motivation, planning, and goals. I know many people who did useless degrees who were in some good, non-related jobs. What they did right was good grades, good work experience, and good planning. Unless you're getting into a specialized field, a degree is what a high school diploma was 30 years ago. I'm getting a degree in something I enjoy, philosophy, because everywhere I'd like to work requires something. I don't expect to make a lot, but I expect to make more than I would have without it. It might be easier for me to say this as a Canadian though. Tuition is only around $8,000 with textbooks where I live. My goal is to get my degree and find some office jobs until I land something I like. I just want a clock in, clock out kind of thing. It's easier to have these goals for myself though, since I don't want kids. Other people might have to be more concerned about their finances and earning potential. This is one way to handle it. You get a degree for relatively cheap that's gonna end you a job that pays you well, and you go from there until you find something that you really want to do for the rest of your life. Unless you have future plans for grad school or a specific career path you're dead set on, in my opinion, it doesn't matter. Picking something broad like sciences, econ, tech-based, or communications works great. I spent many years past 4 because I thought my major would dictate the rest of my life. It doesn't. You can always go back to community college for a class or two if you want something extra for a specific position you're applying for. Most jobs are entry level and just want to see a bachelor's degree and provide on-the-job training. Doing sales for any company requires knowledge of their specific CRM system, sales approaches, their product that you would never get a major in. One major I have had friends struggle with post-graduation job searching is English, unless they went into teaching or writing a book. If you major in the pure sciences, chem, physics, or biology, you'll have no career in your field without a PhD. And if you're smart enough to complete a PhD in those fields, you're smart enough to do something easier and better paying. I myself got off the research plantation and moved into technical sales when I realized how little of a future there was in chemistry, and my wife moved to statistics and data science. It really sucks to hear that people put in so much time and money into something that they think they're going to be passionate about for the rest of their lives, only to lose that passion or struggle to find a job, or get a job that doesn't pay enough, and they're just in crippling debt for years.
One bad decision. This is how a single moment can change your life forever. Guy I went to high school with was kicked out of his college via the Reserve Officer Training Corps and moved back home. After some time of living at home, his dad walked into his bedroom and went off about him being a lazy butt and needing to do something with his life. He decided he was going to take his dad's 9mm and rob a bank. Supposedly, it wasn't loaded. But he did successfully rob the bank and get away. Some time went by, he moved out of his parents' house and started living it up. He eventually told somebody he trusted. That person turned him in. He was arrested and charged. He got a count for every person who was in the bank because he had a weapon. You can decide if he ruined his life when he decided to rob the bank or when he decided to tell somebody that he did it. This is why I could never succeed at being a criminal. Not because I couldn't do the things and make a solid effort to get away with it, but because I'm far too anxious and I'd always be tweaking about getting caught. Guy I went to high school with was at a bar. Spoke to girl at said bar. She said she had a boyfriend. He said okay and left it alone. Boyfriend was not impressed in any case. Waited for him to go out for a smoke and sucker punched him. Fell and hit his head and died. So pointless. Some guy tried to come into my nightclub when he was clearly too drunk. I made the call to not let him in, so he starts shouting at me and tries to aggressively walk up to me. I put my hands up in defense and he's pushing back against me. Then the dude lunged at my boss next to me, so my boss shoves him back. The guy tumbles backwards and slams the back of his head on a curb, paralyzed from the neck down forever. Tried to take my boss to court for $15 million, but the camera showed this guy instigating everything. How did your boss take it? I can't imagine that was easy for him. I think the whole legal process lasted like 8 months. My boss was crapping bricks constantly from the stress. It actually made it harder for us to do our job as bouncers in a college town because my boss was so paranoid about something like this happening again. It's why as a bouncer I don't shove. I wrap people up or get a firm grip on the chest of their shirt. I purposefully swept out people's legs, but I've been able to keep them from slamming full force into the ground. Oofed. Another reminder that humans are alternately really durable or really fragile depending on the day and where you fall or are hit. We can walk off being beaten black and blue or never walk again from one preventative shove. I would probably be destroyed by guilt as well as the financial anxiety if I was that boss, too. Third-hand story from a former co-worker. One of the other Marines at the base, where he was stationed in the 90s, stole plastic explosives from the test range and tried to sell them at a bar that was literally line of sight from the base. The first person to show any interest was an NCIS officer. That guy might still be in Leavenworth. Local police chief did a hit and run over the weekend on a parked, unattended vehicle in his department vehicle. By the end of the day Tuesday, he was resigning. State police had investigated and issued a bunch of summary offense citations. DUI was not among the charges. No one was hurt and the guy resigned, but there's only one reason you drive away from hitting something after midnight. He was going to be the one to put our dinky little private school on the map by going to the NFL as a kicker. Then he fell off a picnic table that was being pulled behind a pickup truck at a party, pasture surfing. By the time I saw him again a year later, he could almost feed himself without assistance. Oh boy, country boys end themselves like Disney lemmings. A while back we had 3 years in a row where guys were driving their ATVs through rusty barbed wire fences which would chainsaw their head most of the way off. My brother, he had 5 kids and a wife and some rage issues. About 25 years ago, he was at his son's soccer game and one of the other dads struck up a conversation about soccer with my brother's wife. My brother frickin' lost his mind. He punched that guy, grabbed his wife by the hair and dragged her to his truck. Several witnesses testified about it later. Once they were home, his wife didn't survive the encounter, and the kids testified to this later. He loaded the kids into his truck, grabbed his hunting weapon, and headed towards the city where his plan was to end me, our father, and then himself and his remaining family to, quote, spare them all from the shame. Thankfully, he'd threatened this many times to many people, and traffic was crap that day and he was intercepted by the police. He served 20+ years of his sentence. I testified twice at his parole hearings trying to prevent him from getting out, because I knew what he was and always would be. He was eventually released, but died 2 days later in a car accident. Thank God. When I was in my early 20s, I worked as an energy worker in field service. One of my really close friends was someone who I was on calls with regularly. A project lead pressured both of us to work on equipment we weren't qualified or trained to work on, and we unfortunately relented. We were halfway done with the task, and I walked out to the truck to grab water bottles. Halfway to the truck, I hear a giant buzz, and then a huge bang, and then just screaming. By the time I get back to the generator room, my friend was fully on fire. The cabinet had arc blasted, and he had been right in the way. By the time I got our fire blanket from the truck, he was basically fully engulfed. I was able to put him out and get him into as much of a recovery position as I could, and then I called our shop to get them to organize rescue to our location. He somehow survived 80 to 90% second and third degree burns, but he coded so many times that he ended up with severe brain damage from oxygen deprivation. He lost his eyes, his sense of smell and taste, and much of his sense of touch. I think he lost his hearing too from the noise of it. He's in a vegetative state in a full-time care facility now. I had frequent nightmares for years about it. The thing that stuck with me most was since the arc blast had hit him basically right in the face, it basically boiled his skin right off. I ran in and saw him ripping large pieces of his face off while he tried to bat the flames away. The smell and sight of that never goes away. My cousin dove into the shallow end of the pool while drinking, paralyzed, and life was never the same. My childhood friend thought his wife was cheating on him with one of her co-workers, so he goes to the guy's house, waits for him to get off work, and jumps him with a metal bar thing. Left him laying with permanent brain damage, drove down to some old abandoned buildings by the docks and just ended it. They had a kid and another on the way, and she wasn't cheating on him. Guy had major insecurities. A neighbor, his wife, and his friends, and friend's wife were at the neighbor's house. The two men both got into arguments with their wives and decided to go out drinking down the street. I was staying with them at the time, and a few hours after we'd gone to bed, I'm woken up by my sister banging on my bedroom door because a car had crashed doing probably 80 miles per hour in a 25 zone right next to our home. I jumped out of bed and went outside to see the neighbor's car crashed into a tree and two men trapped inside. The tree the car hit stopped them from ramming it into another neighbor's house, and they hit it so hard the battery ended up in the next street over. Their car caught fire, and we had to watch them burn to death. I still see it and smell it every now and again when trying to sleep. I'd never met the wife, so I had no idea who she was when she came up and asked me what happened. So I said some guy crashed his car. She took off running after she recognized it. Can't believe I told her that her husband died so bluntly. I had a friend who got into his car drunk with 5 other people, flipped the car, and killed one of the passengers. He went from being this charming, good-looking, likable guy to shut in and was seen as a monster to a lot of people in the community. He ended up ending himself about a year after the accident. He was seriously broken about what had happened. How about that one Aussie kid who on a dare ate a slug that had a parasite, developed a gnarly brain infection and ended up in a coma for a year, woke up paralyzed and then passed away in 2018. He was only 19 when it happened. Security company. This had happened before I worked there, but some co-workers told me the story. Guy was doing well at his job, got loads of promotions, on his way to lieutenant, but was too into his job and got a police scanner that he'd listened to. One day, just as he was getting off work, a high-speed chase went by. He hopped in his personal vehicle with his weapon, got to the front of the chase, blocked the suspect in, and pulled his piece. Suddenly, the cops were much more interested in the crazy guy with a weapon, and he got hit with several felony charges. Oh god, what careers had this guy been turned away from before to still have that desire to be a pistol-toting hero driving him to do this? I know that where I live, the security companies are basically 70% full of people who couldn't quite pass the police entry exam and have real chips on their shoulder. At least in Europe, the private security can't get their hands on weapons like this. Pretty successful woman at a company I worked with got drunk, took an Uber home from a party, realized she left her keys to her apartment behind, so she decided to climb up her second-story balcony to get her spare set. She slipped, paralyzed herself, couldn't work for a year, racked up ridiculous medical debt, and then the pandemic left her position useless, so she was let go. A guy I know robbed a bank with a note saying something along the lines of, "Put the money in the bag." Was released on bond within a few weeks. Went back to the same bank with another note and robbed it again. I think he got 35 years for that second time. Multiple instances comprised of multiple minutes each, but yeah. You know, I hear stories like this and I think some people just really love prison. The man that ended my grandfather had never so much as had a speeding ticket. He was married with kids and fell behind on rent. My grandfather, that was in his 80s, worked for the company that rented this guy his home for extra money. Grandpa couldn't reach him about his rent, so he went and did a welfare check. The guy panicked and ended my grandfather. Destroyed more than one life in a matter of like 30 seconds. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? The young woman that was driving 105 miles per hour down a dark desert road at 6:35 a.m. Next week will have been 3 years since it happened. She hit me head on, and that was it for her. I drive past her memorial on the side of the road every day, and I think about how someone with so much ahead of them could lose everything due to one bad decision. I mean, I lost my teeth that day. I have 16 metal plates in my face, rods in both legs, a screw all the way across my pelvis, a partially fused ankle, and had 2 rods in my back that were eventually removed. But she lost a whole lot more. I hope her family is doing well. This is probably a tough time for them. My buddy was driving too fast on a wet road, lost control and hit a tree, killing his best friend in the process. It ruined him. Guy I went to high school with wasn't going to graduate and decided to protest by speeding and doing wheelies on the road in front of the school. On his third round, he passes a pickup truck, hooks his leg on the bumper, and is thrown from the bike right on his head, snapping his neck. School posthumously graduated him. It happened in 1995 on the northern Illinois-southern Wisconsin border. I noticed his intelligence has been questioned, and let me share an additional anecdote. His nickname was Bob. When asked what it was backwards, he replied without guile or irony that it was oob. Whether you agree with the school's action in graduating him or not, locally it was considered window dressing, as the whole town kind of knew what happened within hours of his accident. A guy I went to high school with was playing bottle rocket tag with some friends and took one to the eye, which blinded him. He was a senior ready to go to college on a baseball pitching scholarship. A guy in my school was walking home with the headphones on, stopped to wait for a train to pass, but was unfortunately standing on another train's tracks as he waited. My dear friend and ex, who I met back in high school, worked for the Conservation Corps and loved it. He had such a passion for the natural environment and had recently been accepted into university to pursue a degree related to environmental sciences in the fall. One day in May of 2023, he was out in the field on a four-wheeler doing his job and he was traversing an incline. He somehow lost control and the four-wheeler flipped and crushed him. He was 26. I remember him fondly and often, and I hope he didn't suffer. He was excited to see a band. He decided to slide down the escalator wall between the up and down as he went to Subway. Tripped, fell 2 stories, and that was the end. In a mildly similar thing, I was also a horrified witness. College frat party, very chill vibe, not a rager, and this kind of drunk guy mid-conversation decides to hop up and have a seat on the railing of a deck we were out on. He hopped up and did one of those panicked flails that you do when your chair's about to tip backwards and you falls backwards off the deck and lands on his head. Medevaced to the nearest trauma center and didn't make it through the night. I didn't know him, I'd just seen him around campus. What was really sad to see was most people assumed he was being a drunk idiot at a raging frat party and wound up doing some dumb stunt. No, he really just made a minor drunken mistake and miscalculation and paid for it with his life. Excluding accidents and fights, the guy got intoxicated at a corporate holiday party and made out at said party, consensually with his work wife, who was a one-rank subordinate. HR was unimpressed with violation of zero-tolerance policy and fired for cause. Actual wife was pretty unimpressed with his excuses as well, and filed for divorce. In Mexico, just recently, an idiot influencer got 17 years in prison for punching a woman because apparently she scratched his mirror when she was parking next to him. Lit a cigarette in an oil change pit. Flammable waste was illegally being stored down there along with a lot of oil. Rest in peace. A guy I went to high school with didn't look both ways when he was crossing the street on his skateboard. A motorcyclist hit and killed him. Said motorcyclist was hospitalized and lived. My former roommate had a great job, made great money, and had his own house in which I rented a room. The only problem was he was a serious alcoholic and a crappy person. He'd get up at 4:30 to go off to work, get off at 2, and then hit the bar until 11. Every single night. Unless he had a girl coming over, and then he'd come home at 10, do a quick cleanup of his filthy room, and have obnoxious and very inconsiderate loud whoopee. Then one day, drunk driving his way home one night, he hit a guy who was riding his bike. Fled the scene, came home, and went to a neighbor's house and said he hit a pole. The neighbor called the police, and on the way to the house, they found the guy he hit with his front bumper next to the body. He went to jail for vehicular homicide, did 6 months and got out. His sentence was originally 10 years, 7 suspended. The entire punishment was a travesty of justice and a slap to the face of the man he killed and his family. Now he lives with his parents and can't get a job because his story is a little infamous in our town. His sister took over his mortgage and lives in his house now. All he does all day is cry on Facebook about how life isn't fair and badmouths the guy that he killed. My God. I can see forgiving someone like this if they have the decency to live on with massive guilt, and I could even bring myself to hope they get better with self-reflection, service, and therapy. But I think I'll accept the social judgment of all of you for hearing me say that I honestly think society was worse for this guy living through his accident. She sold pills that she knew contained fentanyl to 2 people. The first one died. She found out and sold the same pills to another person. That person also died. Boom. Life in prison. The texts between her dealer are what led to her arrest and exposed that she had full and complete knowledge that the pills would deliver a lethal dose. There's a guy that I went to school with, really smart, full ride to a good college out of state. We were seniors at the time, so this would be like 2019-ish. We had a guy come in and give us a presentation on World War II stuff, including some weapons that had the firing pins taken out. This guy took a picture of one as it was being passed around and posted it on Snapchat with the caption, "Don't come to school tomorrow." Well, he got suspended, lost his scholarship, and we never really heard from him again. I mean, he's still alive as far as I know, but he's keeping his head down. An ex-girlfriend of mine. Lovely person, was out at a restaurant and bar with a friend one night. They had a meal and played pool. When they left, for some reason she drove his car. I don't know why, but I know that when she and I were together, she asked to drive my car just for the experience of driving a different car. So maybe that was it? And I imagine driving in someone else's car, you take a few extra seconds to adjust the seat and the mirrors and get your bearings. Unbeknownst to her, a teenager was driving a Mustang nearby. He was angry because somebody passed him a mile earlier and his ego was hurt. He decided to catch up to the guy and floored the Mustang, getting up to speeds in excess of 100 miles per hour. As my ex pulled out of the parking lot to cross the median, she had no way of seeing the Mustang barreling towards her over a hill. He crashed into her, killing her and her passenger. 2 seconds earlier or later, and they wouldn't have made contact. I went to his trial. I remember her poor mother sitting there stone-faced while testimony was given. Several lives were ruined in that moment. My ex was only 26. She never got married, never had kids, never found her way in life. My father punched a window out of anger, severed the artery and ligament in his bicep, almost bled out, effectively removed his ability to work with his hands, which was the one thing he had going for him. He then became a moody piece of crap alcoholic. I mean, he always was one, but he was way worse after this. He then got drunk and beat the neighbor across the road with a pipe after they got into an argument. He was arrested and went to jail. My parents lost the family home. They ended up splitting. I went no contact with him, and 2 years later, he decided he didn't want to be alive anymore. I had a coworker who was looking down at their cell phone and stepped off a curb, under the rear wheels of a delivery truck making a right. And that was it. Really tragic. Last weekend, a young man/gymnast climbed a street pole in celebration of the Eagles, fell and got a head trauma, and then died. Army Staff Sergeant, E6, was on track to be probably the next Sergeant Major. Great guy, could lead troops, smart, motivated, and motivated others. All in all, just a great guy. We came back from Iraq, and that weekend he DUIs into a tree, horrifically maiming the soldier in the passenger seat. Kid lost an eye and most of his face and mouth. I didn't stay in long enough to see the outcome, but I doubt he recovered. When I was a teenager, my dad and this guy just had beef with each other. My dad was dating this guy's ex-wife, and he didn't like that. They bumped into each other at a bar and exchanged some words. My dad left the bar, and the guy was waiting for him outside. A car rolled up and somebody handed the dude a gat. He pointed it at his head from about 2 feet away and pulled the trigger. Luckily for my father, the weapon jammed. My old man wasn't taking any chances, so he took off running. The guy cleared the weapon and emptied the clip, missing all but one shot that hit my dad in the back. My dad was already downtown, and the hospital was only a couple of blocks away, or so he thought. Unluckily for my padre, the hospital was under renovation and preparing for relocation. When he saw that it was under construction, he slumped over and called 911 for an ambulance. The surgeons removed his kidney because it was too damaged to repair and survived. The other guy got an attempted murder charge and almost 15 years in prison. Former roommate of mine was a sergeant on a suburban police unit. Got busted viewing naughty pictures on the unit's computers and Britney Spears pics and was fired. Couldn't get any other job except security. Had a friend who was 2 months away from a medical release from the military, was nicely set up, and wouldn't work another day in his life. Decided to get caught distributing substances, the military discharged him with no medical pension, and he's now in jail. Maybe not destroying his life in a matter of minutes, but definitely ruined the rest of his life with just a few bad decisions in a row.
Teachers, what is the trashiest thing you've seen a parent do? I work at a school where over 80% of our population lives under the poverty line. I keep a cabinet full of hygiene products for kids to take. Deodorant, lotion, chapstick, hair gel, feminine hygiene products, shampoo, conditioner, those kinds of things in travel sizes. Being a teen is hard enough without having to cope with hygiene problems due to a lack of funds at home. So, one day, the entire thing is empty. Odd. I refill the cabinet and 2 days later, all of it is gone again. Refill with the last of my supplies and catch the kid in the act of sweeping everything in his bag. I stop him, take him in the other room, and talk to him. He told his mother about the cabinet. She ordered him to bring her everything he could get. She was returning the items to Walmart for store credit to buy cigarettes and beer. I told him to tell her the cabinet is locked now. I bought a bike lock. It was sickening. A mother came to a school sports day swigging from a bottle of wine. We always felt desperately sorry for her daughter, because whenever she returned to school following a holiday at home, this was a boarding school, we had to wash all of her clothes because they reeked of cigarettes, and this poor little girl was easily the most unhappy child I've ever seen. Woman I used to babysit for worked at a school as an assistant or some crap in Toronto. She always told this story about how the class rabbit would go home with a new kid each weekend. They kept trying to avoid giving one kid the bunny for the weekend because it was clear his home life wasn't the best, but they finally caved in and let him take the rabbit home. The parents killed the rabbit and ate it. They killed the class bunny and fried it up for dinner. They weren't even ashamed when they told the teacher what happened on Monday. Said they were out of groceries or something. A likely story, but what if the boy simply wanted to keep the rabbit for himself forever? You deprived him of taking the rabbit home for so long, and when he finally had the chance to have the rabbit all to himself, he decided, well, what's stopping me from keeping it? Just make up a likely lie and it'll be all his. But if they did actually eat the rabbit, that is totally messed up. Well, in my profession, it's more often what the parents don't do that wins them the Parent of the Year award, but I do have a couple Hall of Famers. I'm a special education teacher, so I deal with kids with all kinds of physical, emotional, and academic disabilities. I took care of a little girl once who had a number of complications due to spina bifida. Her mother couldn't be bothered to take care of her. The little girl wore diapers and was cathed. She required 3 to 5 diaper changes a day. Mom would only send 5 diapers a week. The thing is, she was getting full services from her community, so she was being provided with plenty of supplies. We suspect Mom was probably selling the extras. I ended up just buying her diapers. Mom would not change her catheter regularly. We would change her out at school, but other than that, she'd go another 24 hours before a change out, longer if it was a weekend. The smell from the infections she'd get after a weekend was horrendous. She had lice constantly and oozing bed bug sores. Her mom told us to F off when we call her and tell her to take her to a doctor. Found out later in the year that she also had scabies. We offered to administer the medication and creams at school. Mom told us to go to hell. The girl would come to school in men's underwear, XXL shirts, and size 16 pants. She was 8. Finally discovered that her 9-year-old sister was changing her diapers and dressing her every day, and sister couldn't find any other cleanish clothes to put on her. Mom's response? I'm busy. I have to get to work in the mornings. Final straw was when the nurse discovered what appeared to be STD warts while changing her diaper one day. Nurse made, for the 10th time, another CPS report, but principal insisted that we call home and report our findings. Grandma found out, tipped off Mom, and Mom appeared at the school 15 minutes later, snatched up the kids, and disappeared. Investigators showed up 15 minutes later, but Mom was already long gone. Never saw the kids again. I was wondering to myself the entire time, where the hell are Child Protective Services and why is everyone in this story so freaking useless? I wouldn't really give a crap. That kid wouldn't go anywhere with that woman if it were on my watch. Staff raised money to get an 8-year-old girl a winter coat. We live in rural Canada. Girl came to school the next day in a t-shirt in the dead of winter, her mom wearing the brand new child-sized jacket. For those wondering, the principal confronted her about it, and Mom told her to F off, and anything her kids owned belonged to her and she could do whatever she wanted with it. Children's Aid was called and that student lives with a very nice foster family now. Mother was rail thin, looked like a stereotypical junkie archetype, sleeves were 3 inches too short, didn't cover most of her stomach, and she could do it up properly. Our vice principal is a former army sergeant who's built like a tank. He's well-liked and an amazing role model in a community where many of our kids don't have good male role models. On several occasions, I've seen mothers step well over the line and make very sexual comments to him directly in front of their kids. I mean in plain sight of their own children, and in ways the kids notice. He's always very respectful and often asks another member of staff to join him if he sees one of those parents coming to talk. But it's pretty damn trashy when it comes to some of the innuendos I've heard. These aren't jokes either, they tried to get handsy with him too. My cousin is a teacher and she once had a parent come to a parent-teacher conference extremely drunk and right before the meeting tried to pull out a bag of booger sugar and start doing lines. Police were called and so was CPS. The school also had to call 911 once because a parent overdosed in the parking lot while waiting to pick up their kid, and the poor kid was too young to understand why their mom was slumped over in their car. It's quite sad, but I actually also know a teacher or two who's had to look after kids whose parents, don't really look after them and they're kind of addicted to illegal substances, and it's just really sad knowing that stuff goes on and people are so irresponsible with their own lives when they have kids to look after. The sad fact of the matter is some people do not deserve to have children. I volunteer at after-school programs to help tutor. I had a student earlier this year. Good kid, loves math, loves computers, wants to be a programmer when he grows up. He's really struggling in 7th grade because he has no computer at home. We have to do his online assignments at the program, but we only meet twice a week. I pulled his mom aside and explained how he could be doing much better in school with some kind of PC and internet access at home. She says that she can't afford a computer. I tell her that for $200 I could piece all the parts together myself for a fully functional setup that would be sufficient for at least the next few years. I'd even build it with him so he could learn some extremely valuable information. I'd even front her half, but she'd have to pay me back. She says no way, still way out of her budget. Mind you, while we're having this conversation, she's barely looking up to speak to me, too busy scrolling through the gram on her phone. I say, screw it, I'll do it myself. Scrap together all the parts I can for free. I only had to buy an HDD. The setup was really out of date, but still worked. Gave it to them, kid was thrilled. About a month later, I noticed he's trying to finish all of his homework at the program again. I ask his mom if everything was okay with the computer. She says it broke down. I say, okay, what happened? I'll pick it up and try to fix it. She says she had to throw it away. I pull the kid aside and ask him. He tells me she sold it to her cousin for $50. I really don't like calling people trashy when they're apparently stuck in a culture of poverty. Maybe she needed that $50 for the light bill or groceries, but at the same time, she spends 3 times that amount on her cell phone each month, so it really just broke my heart. It was like she's doing everything in her power to ensure the kid has no frickin' chance at a decent life. I work in a school in one of the most socially deprived areas of the UK. At Parents' Evening, we give every parent a printout of their child's grades in each subject alongside their target grades. Last year, we had a parent of an 11-year-old respond to this printout by shouting, "What the F am I going to do with this? I can't effing read, can I?" This was in front of the other children, parents, and her child's teacher. After only 1 year in this school, there's actually a pretty long list of things I've seen parents do, or have heard other staff members claim to have seen parents do. Since a few people have asked, the school is in the Midlands. I don't want to be any more specific, just in case anyone figures out which school it is. People seem to be torn on seeing this as just trashy or more as sad, as if I might be picking on her a bit. Just to be clear, I'm not making fun of her. A quick laugh behind closed doors at things like this seems to give a bit of levity for a teacher in schools like mine. It can be tough, but I think the majority of people who work in these areas do it because they want to help conquer some of the social inequalities or issues that people are facing, whether that's for pure humanistic beliefs, their own ego, or just because it feels like you're accomplishing something. Maybe a bit of each. Regardless, I feel sympathy for the woman in question and her daughter. One of the aims of my job is to help prevent people reaching adulthood without the necessary skills to thrive. Her behavior doesn't change that. That doesn't make me assume I'm a higher class of person than she is, just dealt a different hand, I guess. At the mention of the Midlands, I just had to read it, and now I have to think about what school it could possibly be. Also, what a stupid thing to get angry about. No one can tell if you can read or not. That's up to you to tell people. I called a parent about a behavioral issue. I must have been on speakerphone because I heard the kid come home. Parents start screaming at and wailing on the kid, cussing, calling them all sorts of names. I don't even know if the parents remembered I was on the phone. I hung up the phone and went to my principal. Teachers are mandated reporters. Don't hit your kids in front of a teacher. That should remind me, I had a really great school when I was a kid. The headmaster actually drove me to school on some days and even organized other teachers to drive me to and from school occasionally at the height of personal family issues as a kid. Teachers can seriously have the most positive effect on kids with bad home lives. Oh my god, I've worked in behavior units and juvies for a few years now, so you can imagine the families we get. 1. Took the kid out on the last day of term, pull into the driveway, and one of the kid's mothers is standing there, can of Monster in one hand, cigarette in the other, and wearing a miniskirt and knee-high boots in the middle of winter. 2. One grandparent used to come in wearing a dirty singlet with his belly hanging out and would try to kiss me and called me love, darling, and babe. 3. A kid left grounds without permission, so didn't have his phone, etc., which we confiscate. Mom came to pick it up, and when the principal tried to engage her in a conversation about her son's behavior, she attacked him with her handbag. I have 2. There is a parent who would walk through our closed campus every single day. As teachers, we are supposed to stop her because it's closed campus. Every single day, she would pretend she didn't know the rules. We always knew it was the same parent because she let her younger children, who weren't in school yet, ride around on their scooters ahead of her. One day, she was walking through with a stroller. She was not paying attention, and her freaking baby started falling out from the front of the stroller. I saw 4 teachers jump up to help the kid, and the mom didn't even acknowledge. The other one happened directly to me during parent-teacher conferences. I was meeting with a mom and her live-in boyfriend about her son. At the end of the conference, I asked if they had any questions I could answer for them, and he started asking me personal questions and flirting with me. I deflected and told them I had more conferences, but other teachers have told me that parents have hit on them before, so it's probably pretty common. Not a teacher, but a college administrator. Parents will call in very frequently when there is an issue with their student's living situation. If they're a butthole, frequent, I quote FERPA to them. Best example, I had to bill a student for around $600 in damage to their room at the end of the year. Mom called really angry about this because they had tried to repair the damages. Poorly, I should add. She ended up yelling about this over the phone, and I reminded her that her son was 22 years old and that I could only talk with him about this. Kid calls me back the next day and apologizes for his mom being such a B-word to me and asks if I could just lie to his mom when she calls back. It's a weird line of work. Not a teacher, but my dad once worked as a groundskeeper at a primary school. Worst thing he ever saw was a guy dropping his daughter off to school, and before she went through the gate, her dad went through her school bag and took out all of her packed food and left eating it, essentially leaving her with nothing to eat that day. Dad was so angry he said he wanted to knock the guy out right there and then for leaving his child with no food for the day, but he ended up going straight to the principal to tell them what he witnessed so it could be investigated properly and get the kid help. My kid went to the preschool run by the public school system. One day, I saw one of his classmates. Every student was either 3 or 4. Moms opened the front passenger door, and they drove off with the radio cranked and the little girl dancing on the seat, leaning against the dashboard. The back seat was totally empty, not even a car seat. The next day, I offered the lady my other kid's seat. I'd buy another one on the way home. She told me to F off and drove away with her daughter again, standing out on the front seat. I let the principal know, and we watched the car drive into the traffic towards the highway. Day 3. I've called the police, but they'll only come if I call during the pickup. Great, that'll only take 30 minutes for them to arrive after mom drives off with the daughter dancing on the seat again. I tell the principal I'm reporting the mom to family services if she won't intervene. On day 4, a guy shows up in her car and comes nose to nose with me. Without even so much as an introduction, he says if I keep harassing his woman, I'll regret it. I tell the principal, nothing she can do. They stop bringing the kid to school after that. Parent witness to an event, not a teacher. My kid's very first day of school. She's 4.5. In the gym hall, all the kids and parents are in line according to class, and one by one the teachers come and take them away. Our group was last to go. As we're waiting, a guy storms in, clearly drunk, starts shouting at a woman in the line, "Why the F didn't you tell me it was now? I've been looking everywhere," etc., etc. He slaps the mom. Another dad in the line pulls drunk dad away and pushes him. He falls down on top of another kid. That kid's mom screams, drunk starts to run out, squished kid's dad chases him. He made it out of the gym, but then got caught and the crap kicked out of him in the school reception. Everyone is freaked out. Kids are crying. Then the very happy teacher who is completely unaware comes in. I start Googling prices for private school. That doesn't sound like a single person involved responded the way that they really should have, although I do think the guy deserved a bit of a smack around the chops. Not a teacher anymore, but a registered nurse. Kid wakes up from dental surgery, a 4-year-old who needed a root canal, several extractions and fillings, horrible dentition. Mom and dad nowhere to be found post-op. Eventually, they wander into the recovery room from the parking lot, reeking of cigarettes and the devil's lettuce, proceed to give the 4-year-old a baby bottle of Mountain Dew. The pediatric dentist took the parents aside into a consult room to yell at them and lecture them. They told him to mind his own effing business, scooped up the kid and walked out. Saddest part was, I remember the poor kiddo had filthy feet and hair, also reeked of cigarettes. He looked so defeated already. All I could think was that this kid has an uphill battle for a decent life. Being a registered nurse is heartbreaking, not always for the reasons you'd expect. Not a teacher, but my mom is. She teaches the visually impaired. There are these 2 students of hers whose parents, mainly the mom, tell them that they can't do anything and won't be able to do anything, and all they do while at home is sit around because their mom makes them. However, my mom has been teaching them for about 4 years, trying to get them to believe in themselves. It mostly has worked, but recently a different teacher told them that they can't do anything as well, so that has been a huge setback for them. I just think that it's really trashy for a parent who tells their kid that they can't do anything even though they can do many things that other people can. Or maybe it's a foreign concept to some people, but overcoming adversity, making the most of the hand you've been dealt, it's important to people's confidence, and this mother clearly does not do much for her son's confidence. Last year, I taught 5th grade. I had a student for 1 block a day that was a little mentally unstable. She developed a crush on another girl and began writing her a ton of creepy notes. The school was handling it, but apparently the second girl's mother didn't think that was enough, so they drove to the first girl's bus stop in the morning and started yelling and threatening her. They basically had her cornered when the bus driver showed up and had to pry this raging mom away from the student. The mom definitely shouldn't have reacted that way, but I gotta ask, how creepy were these notes? I used to work in a daycare, and on my first day in a new room with 15 to 24-month-olds, I picked up a little boy and noticed he had dropped something through the neck hole in his onesie. I pulled it out, and it was a lighter. When we returned it to the mom and told her where we found it, she laughed and said, "The kid gets his hands on everything." Poor kid also sounded like a smoker every time he laughed or coughed. End of day, parents were pulling up to the building to pick up their kids. 2 moms got into a physical fight in the parking lot when one of them pulled a baseball bat out of the trunk of her car. The families both jumped in and it was an all-out brawl. Went on a trip to America for the performing arts. Parent met their kids at the end of the trip for the last 2 days. Parent went out and got hammered both nights and would sneak into her student room, utterly off their face, and wake all the kids up to try and party. Tagged along to our final tour dinner with all the kids and got hammered again. Worst person ever. That sounds like a parent going through a midlife crisis and trying to relive the days of their youth because they're surrounded by younger people, maybe. And it's sad. Was in a parent-teacher conference as a middle school teacher. The kid starts talking about college. The parent looks at this kid and says, "You're not going to college. You're not smart enough." Like, WTF, how could you stifle your children that way? What a piece of crap. Not a teacher, but definitely saw it happen. Dude talks trash about this girl's cousin. Yes, cousin, of all things. There are tight groups of friends, and her friends were not happy and confronted him. Next day, his mom has the audacity to come over and threatens the entire staff and students with some special injection that will make them mentally impaired. As if she showing up to defend her son, who is to blame, was not surprising enough, she goes on to throw an absolute tantrum of accusations and consequences. Our principal, who is a loudmouth retired general, just stood there dumbfounded. Lady coming in like Paptimus Scirocco from Zeta Gundam, being all like, "Yeah, well, you're gonna be pooing in nappies for the rest of your life when I'm done with you." Ah man, if anyone's out here looking for anime recommendations and likes mechas, give Gundam a shot. In fact, start with Gundam Thunderbolt. It is so sick, it will get you into the franchise probably. Not a teacher, but leader of a camp for children. We had a child, let's call him Bob, about 8 years old. After 3 days of camp and 11 more to come, we found out he already run out of clean socks. Well, we called his mother and she told us they are from far away and they can't drive there or send them. After about 10 minutes of talking, we came to the conclusion that we will wash his dirty socks and she will bring new ones on the visiting day. Visiting days in the middle of the camp, and as it came, his mother showed up. We were kind of surprised, because she sounded like she did not care over the phone. Visiting day ended and all the children were supposed to go to the forest to play games and forget about parents for the next 7 days. That is when Bob told us his mother took all of his socks, even those he had on his feet. We called Bob's mother again, and she just said it is our problem, so take care of it, and hung up. I called my mother and asked if she had any socks left from when I was young. She luckily had, and drove them to us. Bob left with 10 new pairs of socks and never came to our camp again. That essentially sounds like the mother was taking out the inconvenience that basically came of their lack of preparedness on the child by taking away all the socks, which is really screwed up behavior. Some people, again, just don't deserve to be parents. That might sound kind of extreme, but this lady just sounds vindictive and generally spiteful. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Linked in the description below.